What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto became a legendary devil lord in high school DxD and claimed every faction's strongest women? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments, and also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Naruto let out a groan as he laid on his belly on a beach lounge chair, enjoying the skillful fingers of his first lover and fiancée Luminous Valentine, who at one point in time was the queen of the vampires race, and now she was his queen piece and was his first piece. How he managed to get the queen of an entire race to be his servant in his peerage was a story for another time, given how long it is. Although, the only thing he could say is that Luminous was an ex-queen by the time she joined him, but nonetheless he was glad to have her by his side, not because of her power but because he loved her. Aside from that, Naruto had taken his time to recruit members for his peerage that fulfill some of the requirements of what he wants from a potential peerage member, unlike his sister Rias, who gained a Kano and later Kaneko at a very young age, which should be around 10. Naruto had wished that Rias would at least put some thought on whom she's going to recruit for her peerage, instead of just picking anyone with an above-average skill or someone with sacred gear. Only at the end she would fail to be a proper king due to spoiling them excessively. Still, Naruto could understand why Rias was in such a hurry to gain members for her peerage. Unlike Rias, he was in no rush to gain members for his peerage, even though he really wanted to compete in rating games as soon as possible, but he was mostly looking for quality over quantity, along with having those that he really liked be part of his peerage if they were to accept his offer, of course, since he wasn't looking at forcing anyone to join him if they don't want to. That's how most stray devils are born. Rias, on the other hand, didn't have such luxury of picking her members slowly, since she had learned that she was to be engaged to Riser Phoenix in order to keep the bloodline pure. The Great War had a lot of consequences of reducing the numbers of the devils, and unlike fallen angels who had made up their own losses in the war through UAL intercourse, the devils had low fertility, leaving them with a low birth rate. At this point, the purebloods are bound to go extinct, and the council can't have that. They may have found a solution through the evil pieces that were created by one of the 4 devil kings, Ajuka Beelzebub, who found a way to reincarnate humans into devils, but the old traditional devils who existed during the age of the 4 original devil kings didn't like how much they had fallen, that they'd need help from both humans and other races they once looked down upon in order to avoid extinction. In order to appease those traditional old devils, the engagement between Riser Phoenix and Rias Gremory was one of the many engagements that had been done in order to keep the bloodline pure. The only way Rias can fight for her own freedom at this point is through a rating game, but she would need members to participate. This is why his sister was trying everything she could to complete her own peerage, but only had 4 members and recently had added a pawn and a bishop to her peerage, although given that they just recently reincarnated, they had a lot of training to do in order to catch up with some of the other members of the peerage. Although if you ask for his opinion, Naruto doesn't see Rias winning the rating game. Riser has a full set of 15 members, unlike Rias, who only have 6 so far, which means that Riser has double her numbers, and they all had very good combat ability unlike Rias' peerage, but that was expected given how Rias had been coddling her own servants and taking it easy. If Akano had started using her own fallen power, the tide of the battle would change astronomically, but with how she is holding herself back from using her true potential, partially due to Rias' poor capability at being a king, someone like Yubaluna, who is Riser Queen, could take her out of the game very easily. Then there is Kaneko. The Nekomata only used the power granted to her from her rook piece. Due to the actions of her stray older sister, Kuroka had led the young girl to develop a fear over her own power, thinking that she would lose control as well and become like her sister. Kaneko doesn't even know that by refusing to use her power, she was only bringing more harm to herself. If she uses her power, she can become just as powerful as her older sister Kuroka, who is a sulfur monosulfide rank wanted stray devil. Then there was Gaspar Vladi, who is a Dampier with a powerful sacred gear, but due to being a half-breed, he was obviously discriminated against by his own family and was treated as a monster by humans, causing him to develop low confidence. Naruto genuinely felt bad for the kid, that he wanted to help him at that time, along with Luminous, who hated seeing one of her own kin be treated in such a barbaric manner. They were actually making progress with him, but since Rias couldn't handle him due to how powerful he is, Gaspar willingly chose to be sealed in the Orc Club room. Naruto and Luminous were extremely livid at the time. More so Luminous, who had once been betrayed by her own race and sealed away in a labyrinth left to suffer for more than a century. The idea of sealing Gasper had made her very angry, even if he willingly chose it, but being isolated still left a bitter taste in her mouth, which is also one of the reasons why they moved away from Kuo and into a town in Italy with a private beach. Lastly, there was Kiba Yuto, although Naruto hadn't met him since he had left by then. Although he had heard the circumstances behind the new night of his twin sister, and it left a bitter taste in his mouth since from the few times he had spied on the boy, he could clearly see the desire for revenge in his eyes, and that left him worried. He wasn't the only one. His parents and his older brother, who had seen his past, were also on edge when the subject came to the night. They had only tolerated the boy so far since he was loyal to Rias, who saved his life, so they wanted to have hope that Kiba wouldn't be another Sasuke in the making. Naruto wasn't as optimistic as before, which is why he kept a very close watch over the knight's movements. He doesn't really care if Kiba decides to throw himself in a pool of holy water or if he ends up killing himself, but the moment he raises his sword against his sister, then his life is forfeited. Aside from that, Naruto has a way to save his sister from engagement, but he wasn't going to act on it for now. He wanted to teach her a lesson in humility. She was starting to get a big head, thinking she was a big shot, especially now that the Red Dragon Emperor supposedly fell right on her lap, but if compared to the White Dragon Emperor, Issei was nothing but a joke. She might have gotten the epithet crimson-haired ruined princesses, but she can't compare to their mother, who had earned her title as the brown-haired ruined princesses purely for her strength as the strongest women from the House of Bael of all times. Rias got her epithet because it was simply passed down to her, just like her power of destruction, but in terms of power, Rias was simply cute compared to their mother. She is overconfident over her own power, but that was expected given that she had dealt with small fries and not real opponents like Riser, who despite being a lecher and arrogant douchebag had the power to back them up. The rating game that he knows will be held will show her how weak she is compared to the other young devils. He had tried advising her a couple of times when it came to her peerage, but she would get angry at him for it. If she doesn't want to listen to him, then maybe suffering an overwhelming defeat would teach her a lesson and bring her down a few pegs. Naruto blinked as Luminous leaned and bit on his earlobe when he was in deep thoughts. His attention was back at her as he adjusted himself to lay on his back while pulling the vampire queen in his arms as the two enjoyed the sunset comfortably along with the ocean. "You're thinking about your spoiled sister?" Luminous asked, not hesitating to make a jab at Rias. Naruto didn't seem to mind, since he did have to agree that Rias was spoiled, no thanks to his father and older brother treating her as a princess since birth. "Yes. She's getting desperate and I don't blame her for it, but I'm upset that she is still waiting for us to solve all her problems instead of training her own peerage as a king," said Naruto with a sigh while Luminous wrapped her arm around his waist with her head resting on his chest. "I'm honestly surprised that your sister would fall so low as to let that pawn of hers touch her like this," said Luminous with clear disgust on her face. She didn't exactly have anything against Issei, but his personality was revolting to her. "If my sister loves him, then that's fine by me, even though I don't like him right now. The only reason why Hyodo didn't get executed is because he is this generation's Red Dragon Emperor, and because despite being a shameless pervert, he cares deeply for Rias," said Naruto as he thought about the pawn antics that reminded him of Jiraiya. Luminous hummed in agreement. Issei was lucky to have Longinus-type sacred gear like the boosted gear. If he was just a random loser with nothing special to him, regardless of how nice he was, he would have been sent to the execution block for touching Rias, who is practically a royalty. It didn't matter if Rias or their family were to approve of him. If the Devil Council heard about a low-class devil touching a high-class devil, they would call for his head immediately, not to mention the Gremory family would be shamed for allowing something like this to occur. The only way a low-class devil can be even worthy of a high-class devil like Rias is to climb the ranks and become a high-class devil himself. The other method is to pass the trials of connection, which will see if you're good enough or not. Luminous became his fiancée because being the former queen of the vampire race made her by default an ultimate class devil. The only thing they had to do was the trials of connection, which was unnecessary but was done to make sure that nobody would go against their relationship. Besides, the trials of connection was highly entertaining when the four Devil Kings were all seen dressed as Power Rangers and tested them. "Let's not think about them," said Luminous as she straightened herself, rubbing herself against his crotch, and brought her hand behind her to unclip the top of her swimsuit, which exposed her chest to him. Luminous might not have as large as her head like most of the women in the supernatural world, but she made it all up with her techniques and her seductiveness. She was also the most experienced among her harem sisters for the very reason that she had lesbian in the past, back when she was still the queen of the vampires. As vampires, they only ever fall in love once in their life. Luminous was saving herself for someone who is worthy of her, which is why she mostly took care of any of her itches by picking a beautiful human girl and getting her to submit to her. Naruto was her soulmate, the one she had wanted to spend eternity with, which is why she willingly gave away her virginity to him, essentially being marked by him. Luminous wrapped her arm around Naruto's neck as she leaned her head to give him a lust-filled kiss, which Naruto had returned eagerly. The beach was empty given that it was privately owned by him, so any concern about a passerby walking in and catching them in the act is practically non-existent. That aside, they had woken up quite early knowing that the others aren't the morning type, so they managed to sneak out. Luminous being his fiancé and first lover, she had more privilege over the rest of her harem sister. The only one who could be considered her equal would be Chloe Obel and Seraphal Leviathan. Naruto's hand kept fondling her, making her moan in the kiss as their tongues met and clashed with each other. Separating from the kiss with a line of saliva, Luminous leaned once more, but this time towards his exposed neck, and sank her fang onto them, enjoying the delicious treat that was his blood, which Naruto patted her head. At the beginning, he thought getting bitten in the neck by a vampire would hurt, but for some reason, he really found himself enjoying it. Turns out, Luminous has the ability to turn pain into pleasure, which he was currently experiencing as he hugged her tightly with his hand reaching to her rear and squeezing it in his hand. Ahem. A voice interrupted their moment just as they were going to go further in their UAL act, as Luminous looked somewhat irritated as she narrowed her eyes dangerously towards Chloe, having stopped sucking on Naruto's neck. Chloe seemed unbothered by the look that she received from Luminous, while Naruto let out a tired sigh, having gotten used to this happening every now and then. The girls really need to stop blocking him. Harem might be fun since you get to have more than one woman, but what some of the hentai doujinshi and videos would never tell you is that there are a lot of downsides to having a harem. The first downside is that some women naturally don't like to share their lovers, which mostly applies to humans who abide by the strict moral code of having one woman to commit to, which is pretty normal and understandable, but that isn't exactly a problem since supernatural beings tend to have harem for many reasons, such as repopulating a clan in order to prevent it from going extinct, to just wanting to enjoy the wonders of the flesh of a woman. Naruto has a harem because he was obligated to have one due to possessing the magic eyes of destruction, which he was the first in the history of Rias and Gremory to possess. That still doesn't mean that he hated any of the girls, since he loved all of them given how supportive and loyal they are to him. The real downside for him is how overly competitive they are when it comes to him. Luckily it's a healthy rivalry, but he had hoped that their rivalry doesn't always have to involve him being. It's always like this every day. Do you know how irritating it is to wake up early in the morning without Naru-kun beside me? Asked Chloe in an irritated tone, while Luminous seemed unbothered. Then wake up early. Luminous retorted. They had been having this argument almost every day and they weren't making progress. You know I hate waking up early. I'm not like you who could easily wake up at 5 in the morning, said Chloe with an angry pout, while Luminous let out a sigh as she stood up before appearing behind Chloe and groped both her, making Chloe moan loudly at how rough Luminous is. Naruto found his boner almost ripping his swimming trunk, which Luminous easily noticed as she grinned seductively and started to undress Chloe, letting both her s be freed from her dress, and like expected, she wasn't wearing a bra. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle slightly. Despite the argument that would start between the two, it always ends up with Luminous overpowering Chloe using her experience in sleeping with women in the past. It's fine, she tried her best nonetheless despite how reckless it was, said Naruto, making Chloe beam in happiness, while Luminous was amused but had to commend Chloe for holding on for as long as she did. Naruto walked towards their mansion that they own and where the rest of the peerage are located. He was already expecting some of them to be already awake and doing their daily routine. Their mansion was made out of wood with a lot of windows so that everyone can have a good view of the beach and allow the sun through. Any passerby wouldn't see what was going inside even if they look at the windows, since they were made to allow only those inside to see what was going outside, but those outside won't be able to see anything, which gives a good privacy for everyone in the peerage. Opening the door, they were led to the living room where they could already smell the breakfast being prepared, which consisted of pancakes and eggs. Standing behind the counter was the bishop of the group, Mary Jane Strauss, who was smiling in a motherly way. Despite being one of his lovers, she wasn't as competitive as Luminous and Chloe. Nonetheless, she was the one who scolds them whenever they take it a little bit too far. She may not be strong like Luminous, Chloe or Seraphal, but her stern look that she gives them whenever they misbehave made all of them shiver. "Good morning, Tilda. I hope you three had fun together on the beach," said Mary Jane with a gentle smile, not bothered that the three smelled like or that they had out in the open, since she was as guilty as the two girls. Naruto hugged the she-devil, who returned the gesture as he gave her a long kiss for a few minutes, which she greatly enjoyed if the way she was holding him by his open jacket was any indication. Separating from the kiss, Mira Jane let out a satisfied sigh. "Good morning, Mira-chan. Thank you for working hard every day," said Naruto with a smile which made Mira Jane happy. It almost made her feel like she was already married if the ring that Naruto had given to all the girls that he's in a relationship with was any indication that he intended to marry her and the others at one point. "If you need help, then don't hesitate to ask," Luminous added, which Mira Jane shook her head a little. "It's fine, you three need to take a shower because you reek of," said Mira Jane, even though she was tempted to have Naruto bend her over the counter and be taken from behind, but the other were about to wake up in half an hour and she need to prepare the food as a responsible adult. "Sure," said Naruto as he walked towards Chloe and picked her up once more as he walked upstairs, being followed by Luminous as they headed for the shower. Chloe was pouting. Once again Luminous had to stick it in her face that she was the better out of the two of them. The three decided to shower together. Chloe had already recovered a long time but was pretending to be unable to move just so she can monopolize Naruto's attention to herself, which failed since Luminous wasn't going to let her have it. Luminous, being the embodiment of lust itself, was already pinned to the wall of the shower, being taken from behind as she moaned shamelessly as the water was hitting their head. What was supposed to be a 10-minute shower became a half an hour. Although they had to stop because Mira Jane had knocked on the door to warn them that the food was ready. "You're mean," said Chloe with an angry pout as she glared at Luminous once more, who smirked at the girl. "You said that you can't move. Love was only being considerate," said Luminous with a grin, using her excuse against her, which made Chloe livid since she did actually lie about being unable to move. Reaching the living room, Naruto was taken off guard when he found himself lifted off the ground out of nowhere and being hugged. "Naruto-tan, I'm here," said Sirzechs as he hugged Naruto. Naruto was surprised but nonetheless returned the hug. A person would usually be embarrassed with their older siblings' behavior, but Naruto for some reason found the affection that he was receiving endearing. "Big bro, what a surprise for you to visit," Naruto commented with a smile as he looked at the man who came dressed casually and not in his weird armor. Sirzechs had already dropped him on the ground, letting him free as the man smiled. "Well, I wanted to get a breather, and your territory is a very nice place. I'm kind of envious," said Sirzechs, ignoring the fact that his wife was standing a few feet behind him, but the only thing she could do was let out a sigh. "You should visit very often. I would love for the two of us to go diving on the beach. We should also sneak Dad out as well. Something tells me he needs a vacation," said Naruto. He would have mentioned Malika's, but something told him that he shouldn't bring Malika's in their fun because Grafia wouldn't like it. "That's a very great idea," said Sirzechs excitedly, but that was cut short when he felt a hand grip his shoulder and he knew that it was his wife. "Zex, be a sweetheart and stop wasting time. You have a lot of work to do, and your poor attempt at getting away from work will only take away from our cuddle time." Grafia threatened Sirzechs' cuddle time, which made him tense. "Big sis, I think you should give Big Brother a break. How often does he get to visit me? Besides, today is a very sunny day and the air is very nice outside compared to the underworld," Naruto said, jumping quickly to save his older brother from his predicament. Grafia was somewhat taken aback as she looked outside and saw the beach, which was moving with the wind along with the sun. Naruto decided to press forward to convince her to see his way. "You should change into casual wear instead of the stuffy maid outfit. How about all of us go eat out in the open before we discuss anything serious? It's been a long time since we ate together," said Naruto with a very convincing smile. Grafia tried to resist the temptation, but in the end she couldn't and gave in very quickly. "I suppose an hour wouldn't hurt anyone," Grafia gave in while Sirzechs was smiling happily and looking at Naruto as his savior, with Naruto giving him a wink along with a thumbs up. I knew you would see it my way, besides you've been working hard and you need a break from time to time, said Naruto as Grafia smiled a little before changing into a casual dress. Breakfast went without any trouble as they pulled a makeshift table outside while having a clear view of the beach. The talk was light-hearted, with mostly everyone greeting each other and overall acting like a family, which made Sirzechs and Grafia smile at the sight of everyone relaxing and enjoying themselves. Sakai Tokakaze, who is Naruto's knight, had a very relaxed smile on his face that you wouldn't think that someone like him had gone through a lot and at one point was ready to die for the sake of the women he loved. This was another testament to Naruto leadership skills. Seated next to him was Ainz, who is Naruto's pawn. The young woman was talking with her boyfriend Tokakaze as she occasionally fed him while he did the same. The two were happy, unlike before when they had lived a life on the run, but now they were part of a big family that accepted them for who they are. The atmosphere was very relaxing. Aside from two couples, there were the Strauss siblings consisting of Mirajane Strauss, who is the oldest of the siblings, Elfmen Strauss, who is Naruto's rook and resident manly guy, and lastly the youngest of the three siblings, Lisanna Strauss, who is a pawn. Naruto was sitting in between Luminous and Chloe, talking with the two taking turns to feed him and trying to compete over Naruto, which made Grafia and Sirzechs chuckle at the scene. The only one missing was Seraphal Leviathan, but the magical girl was off doing her duty as one of the four Devil Kings, or she would have monopolized for Naruto lap. Sirzechs had taken this opportunity given to him by his amazing little brother to talk with Grafia, finally having time to relax and act like a couple by feeding each other and holding hands. It was rare for the two of them to have such a moment. Usually they'd be either busy with work or they have a son to take care of. Everyone has mostly gotten inside once breakfast was over, leaving only Naruto and Luminous outside along with Sirzechs and Grafia. Mirajane was already delivering drinks, which consisted of tea and coffee depending on their preferences. Grafia had wanted to help, but Naruto had insisted that she was the guest and as such she should be seated. Mirajane gave a short polite bow before she left the scene, being thanked by the four of them. Sirzechs let out a relaxed smile which was mirrored by Grafia as the two felt comfortable. The underworld had this somewhat gloomy sky with a different air which they didn't notice because of how long they've lived there, but the change of scenery was very much needed for the old couple. That was really nice, said Sirzechs as he took a sip from the drink that was presented to him, and Grafia followed his example. You have a good peerage compared to Rias's own, you're a good king. Grafia made a jab at Rias' peerage at the same time complimenting him. Sirzechs wanted to defend his little sister but stayed quiet since it was the truth. Thanks, I'm grateful to all of them for supporting me and trusting me to lead them, said Naruto humbly, which seems to increase Grafia's opinion on Naruto, because if she had said something like this to Rias, she would be puffing her chest out and already be taking credit for it, or saying something like, "It was expected of my cute little servants," or, "It's only natural that my cute servant would be strong. They all got stronger since the last time I met them. It also feels refreshing to have a simple breakfast like this without the countless maids and people bowing to me all the time," said Sirzechs with a smile. Naruto could understand where his older brother was coming from. After all, whenever they had a family dinner in the Gremory castle, they're always surrounded by maids and butlers ready to cater to their needs, but they lost their privacy. We already made a timetable where we negotiate the appropriate time where we could all train together. It helps to motivate others to put in the effort along with having a sparring partner to train with, said Luminous, interjecting in the conversation, which Sirzechs acknowledged her words. It also helps us know each other better. While everyone in the peerage is entitled to have their aces, but working together can help increase the team coordination. Naruto added his own words, which Sirzechs nodded in satisfaction. That's very wise and smart. Grafia commented with a smile as nodded her head in appreciation to the leadership of both Naruto and Luminous. So what did Rias do this time? Naruto asked, deciding to finally break the silent atmosphere. Sirzechs' sweat dropped heavily at how accurate Naruto is in guessing that they came because of Rias, while Grafia giggled. You're already treating your sister as a troublemaker, said Sirzechs with an amused smile. He wasn't offended since he had to admit Rias was becoming such a troublemaker nowadays, but he can't really blame her. I may be in another continent all completely, but it doesn't mean I'm not keeping watch over my little sister and making sure that she isn't getting in a lot of trouble, said Naruto with an amused smile. The last time I checked on Rias was a week ago, where I'm aware of the existence of her new perverted pawn, who happens to be this generation's Red Dragon Emperor, and her new bishop, who happens to possess the sacred gear of Twilight Healing," said Naruto with a smile. Sirzechs was definitely proud to know that his little brother was watching over his little sister. Nodding his head, he decided to finally adopt a serious look, which in return both Naruto and Luminous gained a serious look. "Riser is trying to push for the marriage, no thanks to Rias's stunt last night," said Sirzechs with a small frown, remembering when Grafia returned with a half-naked Rias, who was about to give away her purity to her new pawn as a last act of defiance to get her engagement annulled. "Did she try to give her virginity to the pervert?" asked Luminous, which surprised Sirzechs with her accurate guessing, while Grafia frowned slightly, remembering the previous night. "How do you know?" asked Sirzechs in surprise, and wondered if she just guessed or did they actually know about Rias's stunt. "It's pretty obvious if you ask me. She was giving him a lot of special treatment for having a powerful sacred gear, and when he was revealed to be the Red Dragon Emperor, she had practically gambled everything on him," Luminous explained. She had also tolerated his behavior and had even used her body to seduce him into doing everything she asked. "It was bound to happen sooner or later. I didn't expect that she would easily give it away in less than a month," said Luminous, while Sirzechs let out a tired sigh. "Did you at least stop her?" asked Naruto as he looked at Sirzechs, who nodded his head. "She was already halfway naked by the time I came to the pawn's room. I stopped her and took her away," said Grafia, to which Naruto let out a sigh of relief. If she had actually given away her virginity, she would have doomed herself and us in the process. If Riser still insisted on taking her, he could make sure that Rias wouldn't even have the chance to fight or even argue against the engagement, because she would have been viewed as irresponsible and unfit to make decisions for herself, said Naruto, which Sirzechs nodded his head with a heavy heart. "Right now, Riser should be coming to Kuo in 2 days from now on. If I'm right, a raiding game will be organized with 10 days of preparation, but honestly, I don't think Rias has a chance of winning," said Sirzechs, while Naruto knew where this conversation was heading. "You want me to train her peerage?" Naruto rhetorically asked as he looked at Sirzechs, who nodded his head once more. "You're the only one who can do this for me. I want to help Rias, but as you can see, my hands are tied right now," said Sirzechs, which Naruto could sympathize with. "I can't guarantee you that even with my training that they would win. You know as well as I do how emotional she can get whenever I even hint that her own peerage members are weak." Naruto quickly reminds his older brother about Rias's behavior. "I even tried to train her once in her power of destruction, and she told me that she was good enough already, rejecting my help in order to read books about strategy which wouldn't help her peerage against an experienced fighter like Riser, who already have several raiding games win under his belt," said Naruto, which Sirzechs knew about and was disappointed at Rias for rejecting Naruto help. "I know. I'm hoping that if her peerage could see your group, they would be motivated to train harder, which would set a high standard. Not to mention, if the Red Dragon Emperor is trained properly, the tide of the fight could change drastically," said Sirzechs, having hope that his sister might pull through, while Luminous wanted to scoff at his words. "The Red Dragon Emperor that you want us to train is too busy using his own sacred gear power to undress women of their clothes. I can't guarantee you that I wouldn't be gutting him like a fish if he decided to project his perverted fantasy onto me or the other girls in our peerage," said Luminous with a scowl, while Naruto's eyes twitched slightly. If Issei did actually use one of his techniques on one of his girls, he was going to die a very horrible death. It doesn't matter if he is the Red Dragon Emperor, his girls are off limits. Sirzechs let out a sigh, while Grafia was quite disgusted when she heard about Issei antics. "If I were you, I wouldn't gamble on someone like him. You have a much better chance with the S&M Queen if she stopped holding back her true power and stopped having orgasm from playing with her target. The Nekoshu also has potential if she starts using Senjutsu instead of slowly self-destructing. The Knight is also good if he stops getting distracted with his so-called chivalry code," said Luminous, while Sirzechs felt defeated. He wanted to help. "There is a way to stop the engagement," said Naruto, silently deciding to at least relieve his brother from the stress. Sirzechs looked up at Naruto with a little hope. "I will play along and train Rias' peerage, but I doubt 10 days will be enough to get them to win." This rating game will be a good learning experience for Rias and teach her a lesson about humility along with showing her what she should be aiming for if she ever wants to be the rating game champion," said Naruto, which Sirzechs nodded his head at. "If she loses, I will annul the engagement by taking her place," said Naruto, confusing Sirzechs, while Grafia understood and her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" asked Sirzechs in slight confusion, being a little late in understanding what his little brother meant. "Revel Phoenix, I'm aware that she had a crush on me for the longest time. I intend to take her as one of my lovers and future fiancé, and if all goes well, she will be my second bishop," Naruto revealed, surprising both Sirzechs and Grafia as Naruto decided to continue. "This is a far better deal. Not only am I the heir of the Gremory family, but I'm also recognized as the youngest super devil. The Phoenix family wouldn't reject such an offer. I've already talked this out with the other girls and they're okay with her," said Naruto, while Sirzechs was happy. "You'd really do that for her?" Sirzechs asked, proud of his little brother for willing to do this for his little sister. "I would. She is still my sister at the end of the day, even if she is spoiled. I will do that after the rating game, so don't tell her about it. You can tell our parents about this along with both Lord Phoenix and Lady Phoenix so they wouldn't be taken off guard," said Naruto with a smile. "How devilish. You intend to use Riser as a pawn to help Rias in her growth," said Grafia with a smile, understanding his thought process to some degree. "I won't deny it, it will be funny seeing Riser's expression when he realized that he wasn't going to have Rias. The sudden twist would also be a lot more entertaining, especially the guests that will be invited to the party," said Naruto, which made Sirzechs chuckle already, imagining the confusion on everyone's face except the ones that will be warned beforehand. "What about Revel? What do you intend to tell her?" asked Grafia. "Naruto can't exactly pull a stunt like this without at least warning Revel about this. After you inform both Lord Phoenix and Lady Phoenix of the offer, I want to arrange a meeting with them secretly during the 10 days of training to talk with Revel and get her to unofficially join my peerage until we could announce it to the public. I also don't want to tip off or make Riser suspicious so he doesn't do something stupid as well," said Naruto, which Sirzechs nodded his head at. "Thank you for doing this, Naruto. I'm sure Rias will be very grateful for this," said Sirzechs with a smile as he ruffled Naruto's hair. "You make it look like I'm sacrificing myself. I don't hate Revel. If anything, I found her to be very cute back in our childhood days. I'm sure she will be a good addition to the peerage as well, maybe she can truly flourish," Naruto admitted without any shame, while Sirzechs chuckled. Luminous, while mostly remaining quiet, was thinking about how she is going to tease Revel the coming week once she meets the little girl. Sirzechs stood up, followed by his wife, as they're ready to finally conclude the meeting. "Well, I've already made sure that the mansion that you own back in Kuo is cleaned up and prepared for your return along with your peerage members. I'm sorry again for asking too much from you, Naruto," said Sirzechs in an apologetic tone. "I told you before that I will do anything to help you. Just ask and I will find a way to help ease the burden on your shoulder. You already have to rule over the underworld and deal with those headaches of the council," said Naruto, while Sirzechs hugged Naruto, who returned the gesture. "I'm glad to have such a considerate little brother. I will be off now," said Sirzechs as he straightened up, while Grafia had prepared a magic circle which Sirzechs walked into before the two disappeared back, returning to the underworld. "We have our work cut out for us," said Luminous as Naruto nodded his head before he looked at his fiancée and leaned to kiss her on the lips, which she eagerly returned. "Let's go inside and tell the others that our vacation is over," said Naruto, while Luminous nodded her head in agreement. She was sure that some of them would be groaning in disappointment at having to leave such a valuable place, and something told her that they will return to Kuo permanently. "So we're going back to Kuo?" asked Tokakazi with a clear smile on his face, clearly unbothered. "Sure, it would be sad to leave such a nice location which became their home at one point after spending 2 years there, but maybe it was time to head to a new place." "Yep, I'm sure I've already told you all before about my sister's situation regarding her engagement with the chicken," said Naruto as everyone nodded their heads, remembering. "Well, Rias had apparently out of desperation tried to do something stupid the previous night to get her engagement annulled, which involved giving away her purity," said Naruto with a sigh. "That was very reckless of your sister. She could have done more harm to herself than she could have imagined," Tokakazi pointed out, while the others agreed to this point. "She was desperate. I think we can give her some break." I'm sure knowing that a womanizer like Riser Phoenix is going to be your fiancé could be depressing. Lisanna commented, trying to be nice and considerate to Ria's current predicament, which Ainz nodded her head in agreement. Certainly we could sympathize with her to a certain degree, but her actions are very foolish. Her last act of defiance could have robbed her of any chance at fighting for her freedom. Mira Jane commented as she frowned a little. Who did she try to give her virginity to? Chloe asked a very important question, even though she already had an inkly feeling of who it could be, but she hoped that Rias would have some standards. The pawn, said Luminous, answered with disdain, while Naruto confirmed by nodding his head. The reaction among the members of the peerage varied. Some had disgust, others were horrified, and some others were neutral. That's not manly at all, said Elfman a little bit loudly, but nonetheless everyone heard him and agreed with him, but not with the manly part. I don't want to sound like a douche, but your sister has low standards if she's willing to give herself away to someone who acts like Riser, said Tokakazi, which Naruto didn't take offense in his words. I guess Rias was trying to go with the lesser evil. Certainly, Hyodo is well known for being a shameless pervert in their school, but from what I heard and saw, he does have a good heart. It's just a matter of him proving himself. I'd be completely selfish if I denied her the right to have the man she likes, said Naruto, being mostly neutral. Naruto didn't want to be a hypocrite. He was also a pervert in the past, while not on the level of Issei, but had done a lot of things that he was never proud of, such as the Waijutsu, which he created based on erotic magazine, and when Jiraiya came around, he was often dragged into peeping on women onsen, which he enjoyed to some degree. If Rias likes him, then he isn't going to get in between them unless Issei does something to warrant his interference. He doesn't want Issei to become just another version of Riser and end up breaking Rias' heart. If that ever happens, he will make sure nobody will ever remember who Issei Hyodo is, because he was going to destroy him completely. For now, he was going to wait and see what Issei will do. He may never like Issei's shameless nature, especially how he openly eulogies his own female classmates in public, but he could acknowledge the boy's kindness and loyalty towards his friends and comrades. He was mostly impressed and pleased with the way he reacted when it came to Asia Argento, when he was willing to become a stray to save her. This was a trait that Naruto actually liked about Issei. So we're going to be training them. I can't say I'm happy. Chloe complained a little since she didn't want to lose her private time with Naruto. She was also sure that Luminous will try to sneak away with Naruto to have. I'm somewhat curious about how strong they have gotten, especially the blonde knight I've heard about. Tokakazi commented, being excited to test his sword against another fellow swordsman, but that was quickly shattered by the Queen of Nightmares. I wouldn't get my hopes up. Those people can barely be seen as middle-class devil. That knight is also not good enough to give you a proper challenge that you would like. His only experience in fighting is against stray devils, which is rare given how peaceful Kuo is. Luminous commented nonchalantly. His skill dwindled as opposed to before when he used to train under Soji Okita. Due to how weak Rias' peerage is, he only ever practices on his own and fights against the kendo girls who can barely make him sweat. If you draw your sword, he'd be cut into ribbons. Naruto elaborated, making Tokakazi frown. Okita-sensei will be really disappointed if he heard this. He told me that Kiba had a lot of potential to become one of the strongest knights in the underworld and possibly the world. Tokakazi said with a sigh. Doesn't he have a sacred gear? Maybe he was talking about that rather than his actual skill as a knight. Lisanna added her own input on the matter. It's possible. I mean, Tokakazi has his barren power that allows fast draw of his sword. Elfmen supported his sister's argument. He does have potential to become one of the strongest knights, it's just that he mostly keeps to himself. His sacred gear is sword birth. If he masters it, he might possibly be one of the strongest swordsmen aside from both Chloe and Tokakazi, said Naruto objectively. Sword birth? It sounds kind of manly, said Elfmen with a grin and a thumbs up, which made the other chuckle a little. Sword birth is a demonic type sacred gear that many devil knights would like to have due to the many applications that it has. Kiba can create numerous demon swords, each with its own attributes and properties at his disposal. It's also the counterpart to Blade Blacksmith, which does the same thing as sword birth, but the difference is that the weapons are holy swords, said Tokakazi, having made a lot of research on sword-type sacred gear, which Naruto was supplying him with the books. Manly, talk about a fitting sacred gear, said Elfmen with a smile, being excited in his own way. When are we going to move to Kuo? Ainz asked as they had around 2 days to make it to Kuo since Riser will be visiting in 2 days from now to see his fiancée. We will be heading to Kuo first thing in the morning. This will allow us to have breakfast and enjoy some fun on the beach before we have to leave to Kuo at around 10. Said Naruto while the others were satisfied with the decision. That would mean that according to Japan's timeline, we would be at 6 p.m. which is basically the end of the day. Mirajane commented, which Naruto nodded his head at. Yep. The mansion we will be living in has already been prepared and cleaned for us. If you have anything you'd like to take with you, that'd be a sentimental object or anything else, then it's a good time to start packing so you don't end up leaving anything behind. Said Naruto as everyone looked at each other and nodded their heads in agreement. Now then, given that this might be our final day in Italy, since something tells me that Kuo is going to be a trouble magnet in the near future, we might as well enjoy today to the fullest. Said Naruto while the others were agreeing with him. Once you're all done, let's reconvene once more to discuss the sort of activity we'd like to take part in so that I can make the calls and rent those places so that nobody would get in the way of our last day of fun. Let's show the people of Italy how we party, said Naruto, making everyone cheer in excitement. We should have a marshmallow out on the beach at night. Ainz commented excitedly, which got a lot of girls agreeing with it. That's a great idea, Ainz-chan. Chloe said cheerfully as the girls all left to their respective rooms to make the preparation, leaving an amused Tokukazi and Naruto who made fist bump. Naruto groaned in his sleep as he sat abruptly holding his head. Last night's celebration was amazing, but at the same time, it left him with a headache, but that's what he gets for drinking. Usually, he was the kind of person who would encourage drinking in moderation, but in certain events, he can afford to get drunk. It so happened that Luminous was interested in drinking after all. You can't have a party without getting drunk. At one point, a competition had started over who could drink the most sake, which happened when Elfmen mocked Tokukazi for being lightweight, which definitely hurt Tokukazi's pride. Most of them got dragged into this competition when Tokukazi had challenged Naruto, who didn't take this lying down. There was no clear winner to this little competition since no one was sober by the time they had a few drinks. Naruto may be able to hold his liquor, but he has his limit, and it so happens that after drinking an entire barrel full of sake he had finally reached his limit. He looked around him to see himself in bed, so either he was carried back to the room by those who were excluded from the drinking competition, or in his drunkard phase he went to his bed. Looking at his current situation, he was naked as the day he was born, and the smell of in the room was a clear indication of what had happened the previous night. Looking at his right side, he saw Luminous holding onto him in her sleep, but just like him, she was also naked and had that very satisfied look as if she had the best night. On his left side was Chloe Obel, who was also naked and had a very satisfied look as she held onto him unconsciously. Naruto felt an extra weight on his chest as he looked down to see the strands of white hair which the Strauss siblings are known for. Despite refusing to take part in the previous night drinking contest, Mirajane could be seen naked just like him and the two others. Her smile on her face was a clear indication that she was satisfied with his performance. Naruto chuckled a little. He used to remember how he always slept in a rundown apartment building, but now he lives in mansions and castles that would make the daimyo of the Fire Nation look like a joke. Funnily enough, his bed was bigger than even his old bedroom, and that's him being modest because he could go for an even bigger bed. He also remembers how many women viewed him as unattractive, with some even going out of their way to tell him that no women would be willing to settle down with him, but here he is with 3 women sleeping in the same bed as him, and there are 2 more, but they were working hard to perform their duties. He may have been a loser in Konoha, but in this world, he is a king in which many women would throw everything away just for a one night with him, and even then he wasn't going to entertain any of them. He was sure that Jiraiya would be crying blood if he heard about this, but hopefully he wouldn't see the old pervert for another century, maybe even forever. Looking at the clock hanging on the wall, he could see that it was 7 in the morning. Usually, he would either wake up at around 5 in the morning or late in the morning if he ended up having all night. Due to the effect of alcohol in their system, they didn't last long during their nightly fun, and they ended up sleeping at 2 in the morning. His thoughts were interrupted when he felt a pair of lips press against his own as he looked to see Mirajane awake with a smile on her face. Naruto smiled as he gently wrapped his arms around her waist, with her doing the same by wrapping her arm around his neck. "You were such a beast last night, where do you get such stamina?" asked Mirajane jokingly. It was a known fact that Naruto had a lot of stamina even before. It led to those who were aware of Naruto backstory to speculate that he may have gotten the Uzumaki stamina on top of his stamina as a Gremory. I don't know, but as long as you girls are satisfied with my performance, then there is no need to know. It's better for things to remain a mystery. Naruto responded with an amused smile which Mirajane was okay with as she rested her head on his chest. I need to wake up and make breakfast for all of you, said Mirajane softly as she stood up even though she wanted to stay in bed a lot longer. I can help you, if you want, said Naruto. Many people might say that he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth due to his upbringing as a Gremory, but that didn't mean he relied on his family for everything. As a matter of fact, his peerage was one of the few that aren't required to do contracts with humans. The reason is simple: Naruto is an expert businessman just like his mother Venelana Gremory. Growing up, he had asked his mom to teach him how to become a good businessman, which she was very happy to hear and was very eager to teach him everything. He had decided to start his business from the ground without relying on the connection that his mom had made because he wanted to prove himself to his family and because he wanted this to be his test. He had to admit, starting his own business wasn't really as easy as what the media had portrayed, although almost 90% of those videos were scam. It took 2 years to create his own business enterprise, which he named it after his first name, the Whirlpool, which, while not as big as the Gremory large enterprise but in his parents' eyes, he was already doing quite well and they were already extremely proud of him. Since the Gremory large enterprise operates several travel agencies and even hotel agencies in various countries, Naruto wanted to try his hand on something different. His business operates several restaurants and even schools all over Japan. His business enterprise's purpose was to help those who can't find work by creating working opportunities for them while also giving education to those who can't afford it. He also managed to own several apartment buildings which he rented at a very reasonable price. All of those had been one of the many reasons why he had lived a luxurious life, because his business had kept pumping him money on a daily basis in his bank account, so he didn't need to do contracts with humans like his sister and the Sea Tree heiress does. His peerage was also in the business industry since he had helped them get in, since some of them had started to feel like freeloaders or moochers, and as such, they wanted to be of help. For that, he had created several branches in his enterprise to allow his peerage to get involved and make an income for themselves. For instance, Tokakazi became the president of the Tokakazi Company, with Ainz becoming his vice president. The company operates several dojos and sports clubs around Japan. Due to Japan being a country of samurai, his company had succeeded as many people had appreciated him for trying to keep Japan's history alive. He also occasionally made videos on YouTube which Naruto would promote, which shows Tokakazi and Ainz displaying a glimpse of their swordsmanship, which seemed to get a lot of the younger generation interested in the forgotten art given how cool it looked in their eyes. Now the couple had a good income to live for a century without any problem. Then there was Mirajane, who became the president of the Strauss Company, with her siblings choosing to work with her. The company operates on several photo shoots, magazines, and the fashion industry. Mirajane became a model while Lee-Sana had decided to use her hidden talent to create clothes for both genders. Elfman had decided to create music, which he was very good at doing. Then there was Seraphal Leviathan. She already has a show that operates in both the underworld and in the human world. Naruto decided to be the good lover that he is by appearing on several of her movies and shows while also promoting it to the public, including to other countries, which seemed to give her an even massive fanbase, something that she had made sure to reward him for. As for both Luminous and Chloe, the two remained glued to his side like always, so they work for him as well. Luminous mostly dealt with restaurants, making sure to promote culture diversity by bringing European food to Japan along with promoting Japanese cuisine, which is a success. She also enjoyed promoting classic music that seemed to please the older generation quite a lot. Chloe was naturally a very kind-hearted soul, having at one point been raised on the teaching of the God of Bible. Despite having abandoned her humanity by becoming a reincarnated devil, she still took those teachings to heart even if said God was dead. She had operated various schools around the country that included building ones for the poor. She also donated and even built several orphanages for children who had found themselves on the street. Naturally, Chloe was doing quite well, and seeing the smiles on the faces of those people had been her reward, as it gave her a lot of peace of mind at seeing people being impacted by her action in a positive way. Overall, Naruto's peerage was doing quite well financially, and it seemed to bring them even more closer as they became a family to each other. Their bond can't simply be broken, if anything it was impossible to break it. Paperwork might have been a bitch at the beginning, but Naruto had managed to solve it by creating a durable clone that works the same as the shadow clone, with a few additions because he doesn't want the clone to start gaining an individuality and end up rebelling against him, so the clone duty is to follow his given task. He had of course shared it with his peerage members and his family, which apparently resulted in Sirzechs and his father to hug him while crying tears of joy. His father also happened to be a master cook, and he took after him quite a lot, which meant that he also possessed the skills of a master chef, since he did try every food all around the globe and learned how to make it. "It's fine. But if you insist, we might as well take a shower before we can start cooking," said Mirajane, to which Naruto didn't argue against her as he gave a simple nod. Despite the headache and slight soreness from last night, Naruto was able to stand up on both his feet ready to start a new day. It would be an hour before Luminous and Chloe could wake up. "She has every right to be jealous," said Naruto as everyone looked at him wanting to understand more about his story. "We might have been raised with love from both our parents and older brother, but we were different. While I get to choose who I want to be with because of my male privilege and overall because of my strength, Rias on the other hand is stuck in a loveless engagement with a man who only sees her body and her last name," said Naruto calmly. "I was going through life nonchalantly building my peerage slowly while she was stuck with a deadline. Her only solution to breaking the engagement is through a rating game, and that would mean she'd need many pieces for her peerage to participate." Naruto continued to explain as he let out a small sigh. "At one point, our gap has widened. I was the prodigy and genius of the clan. People were already expecting me to one day succeed my brother as the next Lucifer. I was recognized as the youngest super devil, and I already made a name for myself in the underworld, while Rias remained in both mine and Big Brother's shadow." Naruto finished as everyone gave him a sympathetic look. "It's not your fault. I remember clearly how you offered multiple times to train her in her magic of destruction, but she turned you down, saying how she's already good enough and needed to read books about strategy just so she can beat that Sea-Tree girl in a chess match," said Luminous with a frown on her face as she remembered how delusional Rias was in her strength. "You've worked harder than anyone else for your strength. I mean, how many people can claim to have fought against Tannen the Meteor Dragon at only the age of 12 as part of his training? She didn't put an effort into her training. It's only natural that she'd always be stuck in both your shadows," said Luminous with a slight shake of her head. "You seem to really dislike Rias. What gives?" asked Mirajane politely and a little bit interested. Naruto and Luminous never really talked that much about Rias. "I don't like her. I only tolerate her because she is Love's little sister. Ever since I met her, I knew deep down that I was never going to like her. She had a lot of nerve at the time to try and get me to join her peerage despite knowing that I was Love's queen," said Luminous in slight disgust while Naruto rubbed his temple remembering the event. "When she failed at that, she tried to use her sob story to manipulate me into feeling bad for her and joining her peerage. Too bad, her little sob story didn't move me in the slightest. You would expect that after being rejected a second time that she would quit, but she didn't. She continued to harass me every day to try and get me to join her peerage as her bishop," Luminous recalled with clear disdain. "When that failed, she decided to throw a tantrum to her parents and even had the nerve to demand that Love would transfer me to her immediately by trying to guilt-trip him, and even called him selfish for not understanding how she felt in regards to her engagement," said Luminous with even more disgust while the others frowned even more. Luckily, her tantrum didn't last long when instead of getting sympathy from her parents or her siscon of a brother, she was reprimanded and punished. "I do admit, she did apologize afterwards, but I still didn't like her that much," said Luminous with a satisfied smile at seeing Rias' expression. "Wow, you really had it hard, Naruto-kun," Mirajane said, but she somewhat understood. "My dad and big brother spoiled her quite a lot. She was raised being told yes and given everything she had ever wanted. This was the second time that she simply couldn't get her way, the first being in regards to her engagement and the second being in regards to having Luminous in her peerage," said Naruto with a sigh. "Honestly, she was the one being selfish here. Didn't she already have 3 pieces?" asked Chloe, which Naruto nodded his head. "Are you both at least on good terms?" asked Tokukazu with a worried tone. He didn't really wish for anyone to have a bad relationship with their own siblings or their parents. Naruto was like his second brother aside from Licht, who is his adopted brother since his grandma did adopt him. Being also one of the people who knew about his past life as Naruto Uzumaki, he really wanted Naruto to be happy. Naruto had given him and Ainz a second chance at life, gave them a roof on top of them, treated them as family and not as servants. Those were just one of the many things Naruto had done for all of them. Yes, our dispute was nothing more than just a normal disagreement between siblings. She learned from her lesson and apologized to me and Luminous for her immature behavior, and so far she seems to be doing well," said Naruto, which seemed to make Tokakaze feel relieved. "That's good to hear. It would be kind of awkward meeting them if you both weren't on good terms," said Ainz with a kind smile, happy that they didn't hate each other. "Now, once you're done with eating, let's bring our suitcases to the living room, which will be transported to our mansion in Kuo. We still have an hour to play in the water," said Naruto as he stood up picking the plates, which the others followed his example. "It's time we leave, guys," said Naruto as he came out of the house, having checked that they weren't missing anything in particular. He wore a blue shirt that exposed a part of his chest, which displayed his crimson necklace that was given to him as a gift from his mother. He wasn't on his own, as he was accompanied by both Luminous and Chloe, who remained by his side. The Strauss siblings were huddled together in a group as they enjoyed taking pictures on the beach as souvenirs. Tokakaze seems to have the same idea, as most of his pictures were either alone or with Ainz. "Sure, let's first take a group photo to commemorate this moment," Tokakaze suggested with a smile on his face, which Naruto didn't mind since it'd be nice to have pictures to add to the album. The camera was set a few feet in front of them as they stood close to the water of the beach. Naruto, being the king, had stood in the middle with his queen being by his right side, which was Luminous, while Chloe chose his left side. Tokakaze stood next to Ainz on the far left, holding onto her with a smile on his face, while the Strauss siblings stood together on the right side. Both Tokakaze and Elfmen were standing at the end of the line. Pop! The camera flashed, having immediately taken a picture of the group as if it was magically activated, which was kind of the case. A few more pictures were taken before the group separated as they checked the picture and liked them quite a lot. "I'm seriously going to miss this place," said Elfmen as he looked at the sun and the beach, which they played in, trained in and partied in like crazy. He couldn't help but shed a few manly tears. "We've made a lot of memories here. This place was like a home to us." Ainz agreed, but only few seemed to have understood the hidden meaning behind her words. To Ainz and Tokakaze, the beach was a place where they made a lot of happy memories with their old friends, classmates, where Licht had ignited a dream in all of them. Now, this beach became a place where they met new friends and family. Overall, the beach was a place where they can enjoy their life while forgetting the painful past. The past 2 years were a healing period for the two couples. To them, they managed to finally accept what had happened to them, while also it became a place which ignited a new dream. Their dream is to continue standing by Naruto's side, for he is a family to them and will always be that way forever. Their other new dream is to one day save their old friends, classmates, and bring them here where they can once more experience the fun they once used to have. A home isn't about the location, but rather, it's about the people you're sharing your home with. "This place quickly became a home to me because you all are with me," said Naruto in a wise tone, which definitely made them really happy. "I believe that anything can be a home as long as you're all with me. Even a jail cell can be a home if you have people that you greatly treasure with you to share," said Naruto, jokingly making some of them laugh but also agree. "I agree with our king on this," said Tokakaze as he placed his arm around Naruto's shoulder, who was amused. Everyone gazed one last time at the beach before immediately walking back to the mansion they used to live in. The living room area was empty because the suitcases were teleported back to their mansion in Kuo. "Luckily, Big Brother had given me the coordination to our new home. It's just a matter of creating a magic circle or a portal there," said Naruto as he snapped his finger, creating a red portal before him. All of them walked together through the portal without any hesitation as they trusted Naruto. They were all ready to march to their death along with their king. As they walked through the red portal, as it closed behind them, leaving an empty house. Just like Naruto had predicted, Kuo, a once peaceful town, is soon going to be the center of many conflicts, peace treaty and other headaches that involve the supernatural world, which Naruto and his Peerage are going to be dragged into. It will also be a place where an old wound will be reopened once more. A place where Naruto will eventually have to face his past. It's dark. Ainz commented absent-mindedly as the group had arrived at Kuo, but instead of the sunny day of Italy, it was practically 6 p.m. in Japan time. The two countries were practically 8 hours apart from each other, which Naruto had told them the day before, as while Italy was still 10 in the morning, Japan was currently 6 p.m. "Ah, you're all finally here," said Sirzechs with a smile on his face as he appeared out of nowhere, lifting Naruto off the floor before giving him a bone-crushing hug, while Grafia stood behind him before letting out a sigh. If it was Rias, she would already be bright red and embarrassed if this was done to her in front of her own peerage, but Naruto was just built differently, which is why he didn't mind as he patted Sirzechs' back. Everyone mostly sweat drop, but they were used to this type of behavior occurring. "I am surprised that you managed to guess that I will come at that time unless you've been waiting," said Naruto with an amused smile as he was let go from the hug. "Well, you're my little brother, so I have to at least know what goes most of the time in your head," said Sirzechs. He was in no way mocking Naruto, rather he was indirectly calling Naruto unpredictable, which is kind of true since not many people can tell what goes most of the time in his head. "How is work going for you?" asked Naruto as he looked at Sirzechs, who seemed to be in even better shape than before, which meant that his Grafia cuddle time had increased. "Wonderful. Those modified clone magic that you created is a blessing in disguise. Even better, those clones weren't rebelling as before," said Sirzechs as he was reminiscing about the time when his own clones gained a different personality and started rebelling. Grafia seemed to remember the chaotic day as if it was yesterday and had a small blush. Apparently, the clones of Sirzechs have taken the original as their hostage and had made demands. The demands involved each clone getting to have with Grafia, but an argument started over who got to go first. Sirzechs, being the laid-back person that he is, wasn't really threatened by his clone, who seems to possess a portion of his strength. Instead, he seemed to gain sympathy to his clones and suggested a gangbang, which was quite well received by the other clones who once thought that Sirzechs was a bastard for making them work as his slave. Grafia wouldn't openly admit it, but she had a lot of fun that night. She had dealt with different types of her husband. An angry Sirzechs with a lot of anger issues. A sadistic Sirzechs who openly talked about the kind of pain he will be inflicting on her. A romantic Sirzechs who was taking it slow with her. There were different types of Sirzechs in just one bed, with her being in the middle. Afterwards, Naruto had created a modified clone magic that will act like the original, but it won't have a free will of its own, as its main job is to follow the command given to him by the original. So far, it has been quite a few years since the incident, and so far the modified clone has been working quite well. "I'm glad to hear that. Those were weird days when the clones would start a revolution out of nowhere while holding the original as a hostage," said Naruto with a chuckle, which made those who weren't around when it happened or even aware of this to sweat drop heavily. Sirzechs laughed it off. Despite how chaotic that day went, he was glad since he was now semi-free. His clone is currently working on those never-ending paperwork, but since he was a very good-hearted person, he created another clone to assist the other one. "Well, let's get to why I'm here," said Sirzechs with a hint of seriousness in his voice as the others got serious. To others, they stood on an empty land a little bit away from the town, but the reality is that a barrier was set to conceal the house. The place where they stood gave them a good bird view of the town, which was illuminated by the street lights, houses, shops and other things. It was a very good place to build a house if you don't want to be near anyone, or in the case of Naruto Peerage, it's a good place to fight without grabbing too much attention. Some of you might be wondering where the home that you'll be all staying in soon is. "Well, please follow me," said Sirzechs as he guided Naruto Peerage as they walked past an invisible barrier. Many were in awe at what they saw. It was a powerful camouflage spell that hid the mansion completely. Even high-class devils wouldn't notice it unless you were actively looking for it. The property was covered in large iron fences with a large iron gate. All of them were magically enchanted to not break easily, which meant it's capable of taking many spells head-on. There was also another barrier that covered the entire property, which had a multitude purpose. The first is to alert him and the others in the house when someone trespassed on his property, and if they were hiding, it would pinpoint their location. The property was practically a fortress in itself, which now leads us to the main event. The iron gate stood as an obstacle to anyone who was foolish enough to try and walk in. Some of you might not notice, but the gates are magically enchanted. Which means you can't just walk in by pushing it unless you live here or were given the ability to open the door. You can open them the old school way, which is to push while channeling your magic into it. Said Sirzechs as he demonstrated by pushing his magic onto the gate, resulting in a magic circle to appear on it showing the Gremory clan insignia. The gates opened on their own, revealing a long driveway that leads to several beautiful gardens that were taken care of and a fountain that stood a few feet in front of the mansion. The other method is to open it or close it using a mental command. Basically, you imagine the gate opening, or in this case, it will be closing, like this. Said Sirzechs as he gave a mental command for the gate to close behind them, spooking a few. Naruto and Luminous weren't as surprised as the others with seeing such a neat trick due to their respective upbringing. People like Elfmen on the other hand were amazed and were looking at the gate as if he was a kid who had just seen a magic trick. Although you can technically teleport inside if you can use the Gremory magic circle, I'm sure that all of you are capable of doing a standard magic circle. Said Sirzechs as he continued walking through the driveway in silence as everyone carefully looked at their new home in appreciation. Luminous was happy at seeing the large garden. It was one of her hobbies to just sit on the window with a wine in one hand while gazing at the moon or at the garden before her. The mansion, while not on the level of the Gremory castle, but it was big enough to have everything a group of teenagers would want. This is really manly, said Elfmen, much to the amusement of others, with Sirzechs chuckling in amusement. I'm glad you like it. The mansion is built to have everything that a couple of teenagers would definitely enjoy. There are also a lot more things behind the mansion itself, so buckle your seats because I'm taking all of you on a tour. Said Sirzechs while Graphia shook her head at seeing Sirzechs coming up with an excuse to evade work. Then again, she can't complain since his clones were technically taking his place and were doing the work, so she was willing to let him have this moment of rest. Besides, she can even have more cuddle times with him, which is even better than before. Naruto let himself fall to the couch that was in the spacious living room. He was far from being tired since it hasn't been more than 5 hours since they woke up. Currently, it was 7:30 p.m., which meant they spent an hour and a half being given a tour around the mansion, which was bigger than how it may appear on the outside. Naruto doesn't really have a problem with living arrangements. He can live in an apartment and he would be chill about it as long as it has his basic needs met and as long as his peerage is with him. After Sirzechs was done with his tour, the others had decided to pick their rooms, thus leaving Naruto with his older brother. So, has something happened since the last time we talked? Asked Naruto, opening one eye as he looked at his older brother, who was amused at how he guessed right. Naruto refrained from dissing Rias this time around. He was sure that Rias wasn't going to pull another reckless stunt in just half a day, since she returned to Kuo today after she was pulled back to the Gremory territory the previous day after she almost gave her purity to her new pawn. Naruto likes to say that Rias was smart. It's her stubbornness that he also has that often makes her do stupid stunts like the one from the day before where she almost screwed herself in more ways than one. At least, Rias wasn't like him when he was in the Elemental Nation. She can learn from her mistake if you sat her down and explained things to her, but that was mostly due to having good parents and because Rias was much smarter than him back when he was still a shinobi of Konoha. Was I really that obvious? Asked Sirzechs. He was sure that his intention may not have been that obvious, but maybe his little brother was just that smart, or maybe because he had dealt with two-faced assholes back when he was a shinobi of Konoha. Don't be surprised. I have dealt with people who were very good at masking their intentions. Besides, even with your new freedom from having your clones do your job, the current Lucifer can't just come to the human world without a reason, or that be calling trouble if others heard about it. Said Naruto, which Sirzechs understood. Even if this was a devil territory, people forget that Kuo formerly belonged to the Yukai faction before a negotiation was made to allow Kuo to be owned by Sona's Sea-Tree and Rias Gremory. That aside, Sirzechs staying for a long period of time would get people to question what he's plotting, or some people might get ballsy enough to launch an attack against him using every human in the town. You're right, aside from wanting fresh air from time to time, but I came here to talk to you about the engagement regarding Revel Phoenix. Said Sirzechs with a serious tone, which Naruto perked up as he adjusted himself properly on the sofa. So did you manage to talk to our parents about my decision? Asked Naruto as he looked at Sirzechs, who nodded his head. Yes, I've already told them about your decision and reasons. Father seemed to like the idea very much, so he already started the process of requesting a meeting with Lord Phoenix. Said Sirzechs as Naruto rolled his eyes in slight amusement. Of course his father would be happy about seeing one of his sons become a harem king. Of course he would be happy, he always wanted one of us to have a harem of our own, something about continuing the Gremory bloodline and that it's in our genes. Said Naruto, which made Sirzechs chuckle a little as he clearly remembered how their father had tried to convince him indirectly to take a harem. Sadly, there were too many things that were preventing him from really having a harem of his own. First, the Devil Civil War was a thing a few centuries ago and he was more busy with ending it that he wasn't really focused on sleeping with women. So all he did was train every day and continue his healthy rivalry with his best friend Ajuka Beelzebub nay Astaroth, who was also a super devil. Second, Graphia happened, and given how strict she was with him since they started their relationship, he didn't want to have a harem of women who could scare the living daylights out of him, but mainly because Graphia also didn't like to share since nobody was good enough, given that nowadays, there seemed to be an increase in thoughts where most devil women can someone by flashing their. Who needs the power of friendship or any of that sissy stuff when you can live in a world where a random perverted hormonal teenager can just power up so much that he can one-shot several planets with a single attack just because he touched S. Third, he was overworked after he was made into the new honcho of hell after the original died, leaving behind descendants with some serious anger issues that seemed to be directed at him simply because he dared to breathe in their royal presence. Fuck him was his current feeling when Sirzechs hears about a descendant of the original Devil Kings talking about world domination and other bullshit such as beating him and the other fakers who seem to be for some reason stronger than the original, while they who has the royal bloodline flowing through their veins seem to be barely reaching the ultimate class. There is this old saying, a copy can be much better than the original. This quote applies to Sirzechs given that he is 10x times stronger than the original Lucifer himself and is considered to be one of the top 10 strongest of the world, surpassing people like Hades. As for our mother, she was extremely delighted with the decision. She said that you took too long to confront her about her feelings for you. She seems to be also in agreement with having a meeting with both Lord and Lady Phoenix to discuss future plans. Said Sirzechs with amusement in his voice. He knew for a fact that their mother wanted many grandchildren to spoil. I kind of expected that would happen. Said Naruto with a little sigh. He was aware that his mother and Lady Phoenix tried to get him and Revel to spend more time together, knowing that Revel had a huge crush on Naruto but was way too shy to confess, and a tsundere. Overall, our parents are extremely happy since it was much better than the engagement between Rias and Riser. Rias might think that we're all trying to take away her own freedom, but we simply have our hands tied and we can't do that much without causing problems between both families. Said Sirzechs with a sigh, remembering the tantrum that Rias threw the previous day when Graphia took her back to the Gremory castle. I'm already aware that the Phoenix family are the ones that could create the Phoenix tiers, which are used in rating games and outside rating games. If we were to cancel the engagement for no good reason, they definitely punish us for it by refusing to sell their products or charge us extra money for a single bottle. Said Naruto with a grim look, while Sirzechs was happy to have a very understanding little brother. If Sirzechs decided to abuse his power to cancel the engagement, the Phoenix family could easily retaliate by refusing to sell their products or charge every devil family extra money for a bottle, which would definitely hurt his reputation. Being a Devil King isn't easy. You have to always be careful to not step on a landmine that could destroy everything you have built so far. Rias probably doesn't know this because she had left the underworld to join Kuo Academy where she could be herself. Besides, he can't really blame her for not thinking about this. When you're raised with a silver spoon, along with being told, yes, whenever you want something, being told, no, would leave anyone confused and lost. You're right, your engagement with their only daughter would be every devil family's wet dream. Said Sirzechs, making an obvious jab at the many letters that Naruto had received from many devil families who were offering their own daughters to the heir of the Gremory. I'm already aware of that. I wouldn't be surprised if they're waiting for the chance to assault me and rape me. This is why I never go to an event without Luminous or any of my other lovers to keep me company. Said Naruto with a sigh as rubbed his temple, while Sirzechs and Graphia pitied Naruto. Anyways, if this succeeds, then both our families will be much closer than ever before. If you manage to also add her as your bishop in your peerage, this will definitely increase both our clan's reputation. Said Sirzechs with a smile, while Naruto was fine with it since he wasn't exactly forced. Rias will be free from her unhappy engagement with Riser and can finally cool down a bit. I'm sure Rias will be very grateful once she hears about this, but we will save that on the day of the engagement," said Sirzechs with a smile as Naruto nodded his head. "I just hope that after all of this, that Rias will start taking her training more seriously from now on. That also includes her peerage because they're all pathetic. She got lucky again that the engagement could be cancelled, but I doubt she'd be lucky a second time," said Naruto as he looked at the ceiling before focusing on his brother. The rating game will be very important for her future if she wants to become the rating game champion. I'm hoping her match with Riser would get that ego of hers in check and get her to realize that she can't always wait for someone else to get her out of every problem she finds herself facing, because that will stunt her growth and defeat the purpose of her becoming independent like she had always wanted," continued Naruto as Sirzechs nodded his head, sharing Naruto's sentiment on the matter. The crushing defeat that she will face would at least get her to acknowledge her own weakness and get her to stop relying on Hyodo. Maybe then, she can start to use her power of destruction that we inherited from our mother properly instead of the amateurish way she had been using it so far. Naruto finished as Sirzechs smiled. "Funny, mother had guessed that this was your intention at keeping this at the very last second. Regardless, you have my full support on all of this, and our parents have also decided to give you the green light," said Sirzechs, which Naruto was happy to hear. "I'm glad to hear that they're in support of my plans. I will be meeting with Rias and her peerage tomorrow along with my peerage, but I will choose to make my own appearance when Riser comes here," said Naruto with a smile and a glint that both Sirzechs and Grafia had understood. "You're going to do something stupid, aren't you?" Grafia rhetorically asked, knowing exactly that Naruto was going to make a flashy entrance. "I don't know what you're talking about." Naruto feigned ignorance in a very convincing way, but Grafia knew better. While Naruto is a very mature kid, he can have his moments where he pulls childish stunts which she blames her father-in-law and her husband for. Sirzechs on the other hand gave Naruto a thumbs up as if giving Naruto his full support. Women like Grafia won't understand the men. Grafia saw it and slapped the top of his head, causing him to yelp in pain. "Don't support him, you're supposed to be the older here. What am I going to do with you two?" asked Grafia to herself as she shakes her head at the two siblings who are more alike. She also knows that the only one in Peerage who could probably rein Naruto in would be the she-devil Mirajane Strauss and possibly Chloe, but the latter is easily jealous and would probably cause trouble herself, while the former is very tolerant of this behavior and can allow it as long as no one is harmed. "Leaving that aside, I hope you enjoy your stay here in Kuo. I'm sure you're going to love it here," said Sirzechs as he started to stand up on both his feet. "I hope so," Naruto answered, which made Sirzechs frown as he saw doubt in his little brother's eyes. "Is something worrying you?" asked Sirzechs as he put his hand on Naruto's shoulder, who looked at him with a smile. "It's probably nothing, I just have that feeling that things won't be as simple as that and that I might not end up liking it here," said Naruto as, despite looking relaxed on the outside, he was feeling quite uncomfortable with being in Kuo, which made both Sirzechs and Grafia frown even more. Both of them knew that Naruto had a very good gut feeling that some thought he had some sort of ability that granted him minor foresight. They often took his gut feeling with some seriousness, which helped them countless times. "Everything will be fine. You're strong yourself, so I'm sure you can tackle just about anything that comes in your way because you're my little brother, but in the case that something ever goes wrong, just know I will always be there for you as your older brother," said Sirzechs in a comforting tone as he gave a brotherly hug to Naruto, who returned the gesture. "Thank you for your comforting words," said Naruto with a smile as Grafia gave him a hug as well, breaking a little out of her character as a maid to give him some comfort. "Now then, we will be off," said Sirzechs as a magic circle was created underneath him before he and his wife left. Naruto leaned his head back on the couch as he let out a sigh. "Everything will be all right," said Luminous, appearing from behind a wall that she was leaning on previously in order to listen in on the conversation, even though she can easily walk in and listen to it as she was Naruto's queen. "We're all here for you," Chloe said as well as she came as well to the living room. Both women sat next to Naruto, hugging one of his arms, which made Naruto smile, being grateful for having such loving lovers as well as friends and family. "I know, thank you for being in my life," said Naruto in appreciation to the two women who tightened their hold on his arm, hugging him. Naruto found himself being pulled by the two excited women to his large bedroom, where just from looking at their expression, he knew what was waiting for him there. Naruto chuckled, his night will be very interesting. Azazel was having a very good day. He was playing his usual video games in his apartment in Kuo, which he had been living in it for quite a few years, while the Sea-Tree heiress and the Gremory only daughter were completely oblivious that they had the governor of the fallen angel living right under their noses. Azazel could always introduce himself to the two devil girls, but the only one he could probably have a proper conversation with was Sona's Sea-Tree, but Rias would be far too immature and would give him far too much headache than he wants, which is why he stayed away from the two of them, only making contact with this generation Red Dragon Emperor out of interest. He was a peaceful man who wanted to observe sacred gear and create his own artificial sacred gear just for fun, while also trash-talking some random kid on the internet. Now the reason for his good mood was because an old friend had decided to visit him. It all happened early in the morning, where he heard a knock on the front door of his apartment, and like a good citizen of Kuo, he had opened the door, but he was met with Naruto Gremory, his old disciple, which Naruto didn't exactly agree to it, but let the old man have this moment since he did enjoy Azazel's company. Now, Naruto and Azazel go way back when Naruto had first come to Kuo along with both Luminous and Chloe. Azazel had obviously approached him, being more curious about the rumored youngest ultimate class devil, who happened to be the youngest brother of the Satan Lucifer and the twin brother of Rias Gremory, who had been studying in Kuo. Azazel had quickly learned from just a glance the kind of person that Naruto is, which is why he didn't hesitate to properly introduce himself as the governor of the fallen angel, and he didn't regret it one bit. Azazel always considered himself a good judge of character, which is why he deemed Naruto as an easygoing person. The type of person who you'd like to have a good old talk with. Their odd student and sensei relationship had started as they started out with just talks about random stuff, which was merely a way for the two of them to properly know each other before they started playing video games, which they often competed fiercely. Afterwards, Azazel decided to introduce him to a few close aides like Barakiel and Shemazai, who were courteous enough to him, and he learned about Barakiel being Akino's father, which he pitied the man and decided to tell him about his daughter life so far in the Gremory territory to give some comfort to the worried father, which did seem to work. It was then that he also met Valley Lucifer, having learned that the teen was this generation White Dragon Emperor. They quickly became friends, but just like with Azazel, their friendship had started in a very odd way. Valley had openly challenged him to a fight, deeming him a strong opponent. It was then that he had defeated Valley one-sidedly, leading to the silver-haired hybrid devil to declare him as his rival. He had also for some reason converted Valley into becoming a ramen fanatic after he decided to invite him to a ramen store that had just recently opened in Kuo, and ever since then, Valley had started to obsess over the noodles. It came to a point where Valley had started traveling around the world and underworld gathering ingredients to make his own ramen. He was sure that his old genin self would be declaring Valley as his best friend and brother from another mother for their shared interest in ramen. After that, he had met the Valley team, which he had to admit was a very good team, but also a very weird combination, since you had the Pendragon Heir, a sulfur monosulfide rank stray devil, a monkey cane. He had gotten along with all of them and had also managed to talk with Kuroka, where she had told him about why she betrayed her master. So far, her secret was only known by the other Devil Kings, whom he had told about Kuroka's situation, and decided to investigate and find enough evidence to free her from her status as a stray devil so that she can one day be reunited with her little sister. Just like Barakiel, Naruto had been updating her on her sister's status as Rias Rook. After that, he and Azazel had started working together on several projects for fun, which Sirzechs knew about, since Azazel had agreed to keep updating him if one of his subordinates were to ever go rogue, and because Sirzechs knew that Azazel doesn't want war just as much as he does. "I'm glad you're back, my prized student," said Azazel, holding the console as they were both seated on the ground in a cross-legged position bonding over a video game. The other members of the Peerage had all taken to sitting somewhere around the apartment. Azazel might not be that much different than Jiraiya, but one thing that sets them apart is that Azazel actually sat down with him instead of going around whore houses or flirting with a woman passing by. His bond with Azazel was like two best friends. "You're still on about that?" said Naruto in amusement in his voice, not minding it one bit as Azazel just one-shot some random kid in the game, and like a typical Azazel, he celebrated in his own unique way. "Ha! Headshot!" shouted Azazel happily, and like every time, the kid in the game was cursing him like a sailor, which didn't surprise Naruto as that was a typical everyday morning for someone like Azazel. "Do you kiss your mother with that mouth? Give me your mother's number so that I can talk to her," You might never know I could become your new daddy once I bang your mommy and clean that dirty mouth of yours with a bleach." Azazel trash-talked back, resulting in the kid to try and retort back some other nonsense to protect what little dignity and pride is left, only to end up crying. "Is that a regular thing?" asked Tokakazi in bewilderment as he saw the governor of the fallen angel acting like a child and arguing with a kid who is probably no older than 12. "Yep, you will get used to it," said Naruto with a smile on his face, having become somewhat desensitized to this kind of childish behavior happening from the governor of the fallen angel. "He's just as foul-mouthed as the first time I met the old goat," said Luminous with a smile as she enjoyed a red wine that Azazel had pulled from the shelf. "Does he really have to bully a little kid?" Lee Senna asked, not liking that Azazel made a kid cry like that, but those who played video games looked at her. "You've never played a video game before, but this type of thing is just a daily occurrence. Azazel is pretty tame here compared to the kind of people that I've met," said Naruto with a smile. "That's tame?" asked Ainz in bewilderment as he saw Azazel now flirting with the boy's mother, who happened to have been called by the crying kid, hoping that his mother would put the mean old guy in his place. "Believe it or not, but there are people who can get killed over a video game. I remember some random teen trying to kill Naruto-kun over it in broad daylight, only to be one-sidedly beaten down," said Chloe, reminiscing of that weird day, while the others looked at Naruto in shock, who only smiled in amusement. It happened during the first few months when Naruto first came to Kuo and by extension the human world. Some random guy had managed to track down Naruto's location and tried to attack him, or rather kill him, since he was holding a gun that he definitely stole from his father's closet and a plastic knife. Too bad, he picked a fight with an ultimate class devil, now super devil, who easily took him down. The kid was raging so hard that he had to be muzzled by the police that came to arrest him and put in the backseat of the police car, where he was dragged to a juvenile detention center. That day became some sort of a running gag between him and Azazel, who was laughing his ass off because he had met his share of humans trying to pick a fight with him. Imagine having a human pick a fight with a guy who can literally sneeze your life out of existence and still try to challenge him with a gun or some plastic knife that he got from KFC. His parents and older brother had somehow learned about it, and while they got angry, enough where they would have come down to the human world to eradicate the teen from existence, but were calmed down by him because it wasn't worth it. His father and older brother laughed it off after things cooled down because the entire situation was just way too ridiculous and hilarious, but his mom was still quite upset and he had to make it up for her. "You're kidding me, right?" asked Tokakazi as he looked at Naruto, who shaked his head, showing that this wasn't a joke. "I remember that ugly bastard. I was close to murdering him instead for his crimes against my beloved," said Luminous with disdain, remembering how she was going to claw his throat and leave him bleeding on the ground. A shame that she couldn't go through it, no thanks to Chloe. "Have a nice day, babe," said Azazel in a flirty voice, leaving the women to sputter incoherent words, not believing that someone had that much nerve to flirt with her and even ask her out. The kid had ended up leaving the game altogether, where his mother would probably ban him from ever playing games. "I still have some game left in me," said Azazel proudly to himself as he had made the woman speechless, and he was sure that she was blushing from the other side of the screen. "Sure, you're the only old man that I've met who can actually pull such a stunt without getting slapped in the face or decked in the balls," said Naruto with slight amusement, since surprisingly, Azazel was good at what he was doing. "I will take that as a compliment. Although, I could see that you've added more girls to your ever-growing harem and they still haven't been split in half by that horse dick," said Azazel with a proud look on his face as he saw the blush on the girls with Naruto and the shameless look on Lumina's face. "Ever since the size of my dick was leaked out, I've had many thoughts attempt to rape me, and I wish they were discreet about it, but instead I've seen women with boyfriend pretend to trip just to cope a feel of my balls," said Naruto as Azazel burst out in laughter, while the others were not surprised since it did often happen. Apparently, the underworld had a devil version of Ika Kiryu who has the ability to calculate a male's manhood size just by looking. The female devil with that ability had proceeded to spread it, resulting in his current predicament with his father openly crying tears of joy. "Then count yourself lucky to not have been in the same room as the other female fallen angel or my secretary Penomwe," said Azazel, while Naruto shuddered as he remembered Penomwe giving him the "fuck me" eyes while licking her lips towards him, not caring that the others were looking at her. Azazel put the console on the ground, deciding that they had enough games for now at least. Like to have a drink with me? Asked Azazel as Naruto nodded his head, not minding one bit. Pouring a cup for the two of them, Naruto and Azazel had sat down on a chair enjoying the silence. So you're coming here for your little sister's engagement situation? Azazel asked, but it was more of a rhetorical question since he already knew about what was happening between Rias and Riser. Yep, big brother Sirzechs was the one to ask me for a favor, which is to train her Peerage for the next 10 days to prepare for the rating game with Riser. Said Naruto, which Azazel nodded his head, having already expected such an outcome. So you will be doing it today? Asked Azazel as Naruto nodded his head, confirming his question. Yes, Riser should be coming today, which is why I will be there to put him in line, since knowing him, he will try to flex on Rias. However, I now have the opportunity to see the Red Dragon Emperor and see if he has potential or not. Said Naruto, which piqued Azazel's interest. Valley will be really interested, but I've met him once and I could already see Valley being disappointed. Although, if you can look past his behavior, you might come to like him. Said Azazel, giving his honest opinion. I already know that he cares for my sister, but I want him to prove himself with his actions and not his words. His behavior can be overlooked since we live in a supernatural world where most big shots like Odin are perverts. His potential is also something that we will have to see. Said Naruto as Azazel nodded his head. Naruto and Azazel continued to talk for half an hour before Naruto decided to leave along with his Peerage. Azazel was happy to have met Naruto again, and he was sure that Valley would also be happy to meet his rival and a guy who can better understand him. Riser, I've already told you this before, but I am not going to marry you. Said Rias as calmly as she could as she stood up abruptly from the sofa, feeling disgusted from the fact that Riser had been touching her without her consent. But Rias, I think that your family's circumstances are desperate enough not to allow you to be so inconsiderate. Said Riser in amusement as he raised both his hands in the air in a nonchalant manner. This back and forth bickering had gotten old to him, with Rias rejecting him, but she had no choice. This was a very important tradition for noble devils to get together to maintain the bloodline. I do not intend to bring my house to ruin. I intend to make you part of mine. But I will marry whomever I wish. Rias retorted sharply as it toned down afterwards, while Riser remained seated, not bothered. It is a matter for all devils to keep pureblood devils, whose numbers all but vanished in the last war, from dying out. Both your father and Sirzechs decided on this arrangement with the future in mind. Said Riser, trying to explain once more why this engagement was important for both clans. My father, my brother, and my whole clan are in too great a rush. I won't say it again, Riser. I will not marry you. Rias defiantly replied as she turned to give Riser a glare, but she was caught off guard when Riser caught her chin, standing abruptly from the comfort of the sofa. I too, Rias, bear the reputation of the House of Phoenix. I can't have you besmirching our good name. Said Riser sharply, having decided to put an end to this tantrum. President, Issei shouted in shock, while the other members of the orc tensed up even more, while Riser turned to look at Rias Peerage with a very condescending look. Even if I have to incinerate all of your servants, I will take you back to the underworld with me. Said Riser as his eyes glowed yellow with fire, which represent his clan affinity for fire, while Rias' eyes glowed red, representing her destruction power. Please bring an end to this. Grafia interrupted. Her face had remained unchanged and unblinking, showing how professional she was to maintain her composure. My lady, Lord Riser, since I am here by order of Sirzechs, I will not hold back one iota. Said Grafia, which seemed to scare Riser a little, but he didn't show it. When told such a thing by the one known as the Ultimate Queen, even I become fearful. Riser replied back as he tried to maintain his composure around the French maid. My master anticipated that something like this would happen. As such, he has assigned me a last resort, should things break down. Said Grafia calmly, which piqued both their interest. Last resort? What do you mean, Grafia? Asked Rias, curious and hopeful that she has a way to get out of her own engagement. If my lady is that insistent on following through with her wishes, she is to settle this with Lord Riser via rating game. Said Grafia calmly, while Rias' eyes widened, having already expected this outcome. Rating game? Where have I heard that? Issei asked, mostly to himself as he remembered the conclusion of the volleyball match between their Peerage and Sona's Peerage. That's right, the student council president mentioned it. Issei spoke his own thoughts, which got Kiba to promptly explain what the rating game was to the new rookie. It's a chess-like game that noble devils engage in where they have their servants compete in battle. Kiba explained, which got Issei slightly confused. Chess? Questioned Issei, which got Akano to promptly explain in Kiba's place, who remained watching. This is why those of us called evil pieces are given powers modeled after chess pieces. Explained Akano, which Issei started to better understand, having been explained how each piece worked during his first stray mission with the rest of the peerage. I have played through the game time and again, and have secured many wins. Far from any experience, on the other hand, you have not even qualified for an official game. Said Riser mockingly, which got Rias to glare at him angrily. Only mature devils have ever been able to take part in a rating game. Said Akano, explaining to Issei why Rias has never taken part in a rating game. Then, we're at an incredible disadvantage. Said Issei in surprise and shock, knowing that Riser has more experience than them. That isn't our only disadvantage. Kaneko retorted at Issei's comment about their obvious disadvantage. Rias, just to be sure, I have to ask, are these all your servants? Asked Riser as he looked at the frowning Rias, who already had her arms crossed. So what if they are? Asked Rias with a hint of anger, knowing where this was going, which made Riser laugh as he snapped his finger, causing a red magic circle to appear in front of the door with the Phoenix family insignia in the middle. Flames erupted with a phoenix cry as Riser Peerage members appeared, showing a total of 15 pieces, which is more than double the number of Rias Peerage. I have 15 pieces, which is to say, a full set of them. Said Riser in a very arrogant tone, essentially flexing on Rias for having more than double her number. 15 of them, and all pretty women and girls? What a fiend, what a man, said Issei as tears welled up in both his eyes before he started weeping in front of everyone out of jealousy, which took Riser off guard. Hey, Rias, your servant is looking at me and weeping. Said Riser as he felt awkward at the situation, which Rias reluctantly had to answer. His dream is to have a harem. Said Rias, which made Revel feel disgust towards the low-class devil, while Riser seemed to gain his confidence back. I see, Ubaluna. Riser called out to the bomb queen, which was his queen piece. Yes, Lord Riser. Ubaluna answered, and like a dutiful servant who exists solely to serve her master needs and desires, she went to him, knowing what her master will do. Riser turned to her with an arrogant look on his face as he grabbed her chin and pulled her into a kiss, which she returned with a blush on her cheeks. The display of PDA got Rias disturbed and disgusted as said queen wrapped both her arms around his neck as he deepened the kiss. For someone who intends to become my sister's husband, you sure are enjoying yourself there. A voice interrupted their PDA session as Riser felt all colors drain from his face as everyone looked immediately at the couch to see Naruto sitting there with a cup of tea, drinking like it was nobody's business. Naruto. Riser squeaked out, seeing the one person he would never dare anger, the person he had tried to antagonize in the past, only to suffer a deep humiliation unlike anything he ever experienced. Big brother. Rias shouted in surprise and in hope at seeing her twin brother there, and felt some relief seeing as Riser was backing away. Issei was even more shocked as he saw Rias's older brother, as well as seeing the fear in Riser's face. You people are very slow. I've been here for quite some time now. I even had some time to enjoy this very delicious tea, and not one of you noticed, aside from Grafia, of course. Said Naruto, obviously dissing everyone without any reservation, making Grafia lips twitch into a smile. What are you doing here? Asked Riser in a meek voice, while Riser's peerage members who haven't met Naruto were shocked and a little bit disturbed. Revel, on the other hand, was blushing hard and twirling her hair shyly, which was noticed by the others. I obviously came from a wonderful vacation in Italy to check on my dear twin sister. I've heard that she gained 2 interesting pieces and wanted to confirm some of the rumors that I heard. Naruto lied about his reason being here. There was no reason to tell them that Sirzechs sent him here, for now at least. The first thing I saw when I came here is you obviously harassing my sister by bullying her with your measly 15 pieces. I'm a firm believer in quality over quantity. Said Naruto in a very laid-back manner before his own expression darkened, getting a few to feel chills. Riser, I don't like your behavior. Said Naruto as a crimson aura coated his entire body, causing the whole building to shake, scaring all of them aside from Grafia herself, who let this happen knowing what Naruto was aiming for. I can't breathe, thought Issei in pure terror as he looked at the peerage, who while doing much better than him, but they were also paralyzed, Only Asia seemed to be in a similar predicament as him, if not worse, as she was probably on the verge of fainting. Big brother is strong, thought Rias, being paralyzed in fear, as no matter how many times she felt his power, it felt like it was a bottomless pit with a never-ending power. The power felt like it was pushing her down onto her knees. The small display of power was enough to get everyone in the room to realize the difference in their powers. The worst thing is that everyone knew he was holding back considerably, and that terrified them even more. Naruto's display of power was cut off, giving them a time to breathe, but that was never meant to last long. So this is your queen piece. I'm not impressed. Another voice came behind Yubaluna as Riser's face turned to see Luminous, and his face got even paler. The queen of nightmares, said Riser, being more terrified at seeing Naruto's queen piece. Yubaluna, on the other hand, felt conscious about herself even more and became meek and submissive. Yubaluna would usually come up with a retort, but she knew who Luminous was. There was nobody in the underworld who didn't know who the Queen of Nightmares was, which is why she didn't have the confidence to even look her in the eyes. For someone who bears the pride of the Phoenix clan, you sure are enjoying yourself with a low-class devil. Her only strong point is how to sneak up on people while landing cheap shots, said Luminous as her heterochromic eyes zeroed on the king and queen, making them flinch. Don't interfere if you want to keep your life, Ravel whispered to the rest of the peerage, seeing how some of them was about to recklessly attack in a suicide attack even while knowing that they were far too outclassed. Luminous was already sitting on Naruto's lap, much to the jealousy of Issei, but he didn't have it in him to make any comment as his instincts screamed that any comments would get him erased on the spot. This is such a joyous occasion, 2 peerages already here. It's only natural for me to show my own as well, said Naruto with a smile as he snapped his finger, causing a large red magic circle to appear, showing the Gremory family symbol before the members of Naruto's peerage were revealed. Despite their numbers being less than that of Riser's own, everyone can tell that the weakest of them could trash their queen. The magic power that every member of Naruto's peerage had been permitted to leak out was more than enough to show to everyone who was the one calling the shots here, who the boss is. By this point, Riser had lost all his bravado in just a matter of seconds since Naruto's arrival. He knew he was far too outclassed and couldn't act like he owned the place. Riser peerage seems to subconsciously back away from Naruto's peerage. The submissive look on Riser's face was enough to bring a lot of pleasure to Rias and Akeno, with the latter almost having an orgasm right then and there from the pure dominance that has been shown so far. Issei seems to also relish in the bastard fear, while the others were happy to see Riser being humbled. Look at you acting all submissive, you fried chicken, said Issei, thinking that he can finally act smug, but that was a wrong move as Naruto's eyes and Luminous eyes zeroed on him, and immediately he felt a pressure suddenly slam him to the ground face first. Issei-san. Asia panicked as she checked on Issei, whose head was already bleeding but was conscious nonetheless as she started to heal him. Rias was already by Issei's side to check on his health, which part of Issei seemed to enjoy, but he didn't dare show it out of fear. I wouldn't talk if I were you. As it stands, you're the weakest even if we compare you to Riser's weakest member. So I'd wipe that smug look off my face if I were you. At least the others seem to understand that, said Naruto with a glare directed towards Issei. In situations like this, you don't get to talk unless you're given permission to do so, or if you understand our culture enough so you don't end up not only embarrassing yourself but Rias as well. You're a low-class devil as it stands right now. Most high-class devil will demand your head for a comment like that, said Naruto, making Issei scared while Rias was shocked. Brother, said Rias, which Naruto turned to her and she flinched slightly at his gaze, knowing that he was upset with her to some degree. Rias, I could understand your sudden interest in your new pawn, and it's of no concern to me as long as you're happy, but at the very least, teach him about manners so you don't end up in a position where they demand his head and you can't brute force your way out, said Naruto, which made Rias flinch. While she was happy to hear that Naruto didn't mind her increasing interest in Issei, she also understood what he meant. Low-class devil and hybrid devil are discriminated against in the underworld, and while a few families such as the Gremory are the exception to this, but other families could execute one for so much as speaking their first name or even speaking to them. As for you, Riser. Naruto's attention shifted back to Riser, who seemed to tense up even more at seeing his eyes back at him. He was somewhat enjoying the pawn being dissed as well, but maybe he shouldn't have. You will settle this disagreement with Rias in a rating game. There will be 10 days of preparation until then. You're not to make any contact with Rias during this time. Are we understood? Naruto asked, making Riser nod his head very rapidly. I understood, said Riser as he hurried along with Ubaluna to the Peerage as he created a magic circle to get away as soon as possible. Flames erupted from the magic circle before Riser's Peerage was fully gone. Now Rias, let's talk, said Naruto with a serious look as Rias gulped a little at his serious gaze. Aren't you going to give your big brother a hug after not seeing each other for 2 years? Asked Naruto. He wasn't a siscon like his brother, but he does love his sister regardless. He was still sitting on the sofa as he opened his arm as if gesturing for her to jump in his arms. Mostly everyone sweat drop at seeing this kind of reaction as they saw Naruto with his eyebrow raised with an expectant gaze. Just a few minutes ago, they were scared as hell after he intimidated all of them and proceeded to roast them all without any reservation. Rias's expression gave it away how she felt as she looked away with a pout and reddened cheeks. Naruto was enjoying this way too much. He loved it when he teased and embarrassed Rias. You can't really blame him. Rias is just too easy to get a reaction out of her due to being the emotional type. Stop, this is just embarrassing, said Rias as she tried to resist Naruto, but it was a futile attempt as Naruto wasn't going to leave it be until he got a hug. What's embarrassing about an older brother hugging his cute little sister? You're going to break my delicate heart. How cruel, said Naruto in a fake sad tone which made Rias hesitate before she went to give him a side hug. She tried to get away after that, but Naruto wasn't going to let her go so easily as he pulled her into a deep hug. Her face was red in embarrassment as she tried to pull away desperately, but Naruto wasn't going to let her go so easily. Look at you all grown up and beautiful. You remember the promise you made to me and big brother Sirzechs back when you were 8? Said Naruto, which got Rias to have a look of horror as she immediately used both her hands to keep Naruto's mouth shut. You said you weren't going to speak about that, said Rias in a panic while Akano giggled knowing exactly what the promise was. Rias had once said she was going to marry Naruto and Sirzechs, which Sirzechs was crying his eyes out for. Graphia smirked slightly seeing the flustered look on her sister-in-law's face. She also remembered that day as Sirzechs had excitedly told her about it. She wasn't the least bit upset about it since she knew this was just a normal thing to happen for children her age. All I'm saying is that we went from you hiding behind my back and holding onto Big Brother's leg to us being away from each other. You don't even visit us anymore. Big Brother is very sad, you know, said Naruto teasingly while Rias was even more flustered. I was just busy and all, Rias replied back as she gave her excuse as to why she barely visited them. Well whatever. I'm here now so that I can train you in your peerage, since if they went to fight against Riser's peerage as they are now, they'd be demolished, said Naruto as he let Rias go as she stood up regaining her own composure. Rias' peerage tensed up at seeing him get serious again. It was like a switch. He can go from a laid-back and cheerful person to the most serious guy. Did Big Brother send you to do this? Asked Rias. She was smart, so she suspected that Naruto wouldn't just suddenly appear at the same time as Riser's arrival in the human world. As expected of you, Rias, you managed to figure that out immediately, but to answer your question, Big Brother did send me here to train your dysfunctional peerage, said Naruto, not mincing his word in the least bit, which did offend a few of her peerage members along with Rias herself. They're not dysfunctional, Rias retorted back, a little bit offended with her pride being hurt at hearing the truth of the words. Our entire family already agrees with me. You haven't even taken part in a rating game, unlike my peerage or Riser's peerage. Your only experience in fighting is against small fry stray devils and recently a low-ranking fallen angel trash, said Naruto harshly, which made Rias flinch. Issei would have tried to defend his master, but remembering what happened last time made him quiet. It didn't help that Kiba was holding his shoulder as if to make sure he doesn't throw himself in between them and get killed for it. Your peerage members have also started to get comfortable to the point that they got weaker, and I could already see it from just a glance. Do you actually even train them? Asked Naruto while Rias lowered her head again at being berated. As a king, you should be making sure that their skills don't drop like this. You can't expect to become the rating game champion just by sitting behind your desk all day filing paperwork and eliminating small fries, said Naruto while Rias bit her lips. I give them the freedom to train themselves, said Rias, but Naruto wasn't impressed with it as he looked at her peerage, who flinched under his and his peerage gaze. I don't see it. It's either they don't train at all and are procrastinating, or they simply don't know how to properly train themselves. Your knight sword has become dull. Soji Okita will be disappointed if he saw that," said Naruto, which made Kiba flinch. "I want you to look at my peerage and tell me what you see?" asked Naruto as Rias hesitantly looked at his peerage, and she saw how well fit they are, not to mention most of them having magical power that would make her peerage look like a joke. "I have been in Italy for the past 2 years enjoying my own private beach along with my peerage members, but despite that, all of my peerage members have continued to train together every single day, and I'm proud of all of them for working hard," said Naruto, which made Naruto's peerage proud while Rias's peerage looked slightly down. "I don't need to say anything, you can already see the results with your own eyes. Most of them are already mid-class devil to high-class devil. The only exception is Luminous and Chloe, who are already ultimate class devil. Most of them don't have some flashy sacred gear, and most of them don't come from a powerful family," said Naruto, making an obvious jab at both Issei, Asia, Kiba, and lastly at Kano and Kaneko. "This is why I called your peerage dysfunctional many times. You people barely communicate with each other. All of your strategies involve dealing with a small group of small fries, stray devil, or even one stray devil. Your opponent this time is Riser Phoenix with a good rating game record," said Naruto, which Rias was aware of. "Let's face it, Rias, you don't stand a bloody chance against Riser at your current level, which is why you need to level up," said Naruto, while Rias went quiet immediately. "You're smart, and I'm sure you already know this very well. Your pawn is weak as hell despite having the boosted gear. You should have been able to get him to an adequate level in just a month since you reincarnated him into your own peerage. Him having the boosted gear means he needs to start upping his game to prepare for the many opponents that will be gunning for him," said Naruto, while Rias felt somewhat insulted. "I wanted him to get used to being a reincarnated devil," said Rias, trying to defend herself as well as defend Issei. "I've met the White Dragon Emperor already. Your pawn is nothing but a joke compared to him, and if they face off, your pawn will get annihilated. The White Dragon Emperor can already enter the balance break state as well as enter the Juggernaut drive," said Naruto, much to the shock of Rias' peerage and the confusion of Issei, but he knew that he was fucked. "Why, you're joking, right?" asked Rias in fear and concern for her new pawn, as she knew that she might lose him if the White Dragon Emperor came here. "Do I look like I'm joking to you? Don't worry, the White Dragon Emperor has no interest in fighting weaklings, so he will leave Hyodo alone and wait until he's strong enough to challenge him," said Naruto, which made Rias and the others of her peerage feel relieved. "I'm telling you this because not everyone is going to wait for your pawn to get strong where he'd become a threat to them. In just a month of training my own peerage members, I've gotten most of them without exception to mid-class to high-class devil," said Naruto, being proud of his peerage. "I don't see why the wielder of the boosted gear shouldn't already be at that kind of level. If anything, he's expected to be at that level. You only had him for a month, and just from looking at him, he probably doesn't know how to fight, nor does he know how to take a punch," said Naruto, which made Rias even more embarrassed. "We will be having a training camp for the next 10 days to prepare you all for your rating game against Riser. All of you, including you, Rias, will have to train. You want your freedom, then fight for it yourself, and don't always rely on your pawn or the others to get things done for you," said Naruto, which Rias had conceded because she has nothing to say. Graphia smiled at seeing all of this. She obviously didn't like Rias' behavior when dealing with certain situations, and she was happy to see Naruto willing to help Rias get to a proper level in order to fight against Riser. Even if Rias ends up losing, she will learn a very important lesson that will stay with her for the rest of her life. "Now then, I want you all to start packing your bags for the next 10 days of training. We will meet up tomorrow morning in order to start your training from hell," said Naruto with a sadistic look that was mostly directed at Issei, who violently shivered in fear. "Beep, beep, I'm passing through right now," said Naruto Chad Gremory as he intentionally bumped into Issei, who was carrying his own heavy backpack and was struggling to climb the mountains, but Naruto had to be a menace and live up to his title as a devil by making Issei suffer. "Careful," said Sakai Chad Tokukaze as he bumped into Issei on his other side, causing him to tumble even more, almost eating the ground a second time as he tried to shout or say something, but he wasn't given any chance to say his last words as the sun was obscured and Issei saw a shadow looming over him. "Oops, my bad," said Elfman Chad Strauss as he bulldozed through Issei like a truck coon would do to the salaryman, causing the Red Dragon Emperor to scream as he was sent flying in the air before impacting to the ground, harshly eating dirt and whatever else wandered in this part of the mountain. Gah! Issei coughed painfully as Kaneko stepped on his back with her bag that was 10 times her body weight and said weight was felt by Issei's bones. Kiba felt pity for Issei enough where he chose to walk past him and not harass him like what most of them had taken to doing. "Issei-kun," shouted the innocent Asia Argento as she rushed to heal the poor Red Dragon Emperor who could barely move at this point and needed to be healed. "Ufufu, Issei-kun is working hard," said Akano with a blush on her cheeks. Her masochistic side had surfaced in seeing the pain being inflicted on her junior, while Rias shook her head while also being worried about her pawn and her subject of interest. "Is this really necessary?" Rias asked her brother, who had an expression full of innocence as if didn't just bully Issei a while back and got others to follow his example. Even her own rook Kaneko was relishing in Issei's pain. Akano is excused because she's Akano. Luminous and Chloe would have taken part in the harassment, but Luminous didn't want to dirty her clothes by bumping into the trash. The other girls were much nicer than the boys aside from Luminous, Kaneko, possibly Chloe. Then there was Akano, who was a certified sadist like all other fallen angels, so she relished in Issei's pain. "Your trash of a pawn can't even hold his own backpack. If I was the heavenly dragon who killed gods, I'd be rolling in the sacred gear in shame. I wouldn't be surprised if he became the boob dragon. I'd wonder how much therapy the Welsh dragon will have to go through to nurse his battered pride." Luminous mockingly said as Rias gasped, feeling insulted. "Be grateful I'm not throwing him into a ravine," said Naruto bluntly, making Rias' eyes twitch. Naruto had some PTSD left from that day when Jiraiya had pushed him into a ravine just so he could access Kyuubi's chakra. "That's taking it too far," said Rias as he saw Asia finish healing Issei, who sat rubbing the back of his head while thanking the former nun. "Rias, do you know how dragons train their own hatchlings?" asked Naruto as Rias blinked her eyes in confusion. While she did take interest in dragons at one point due to the meteor dragon Tannen being a reincarnated devil, but she never delved that much into their way of life. That was Sona's thing. Dragons train their hatchlings through hands-on experience. Meaning when they try to teach them how to fly, they'd push them off the largest mountain and let them figure shit out. Said Naruto with an unsettling grin. He wouldn't tell her that he wanted to vent out on someone, and Issei presented himself as the perfect guinea pig. Dragon is also a powerful race that doesn't associate with any of the factions and live their life freely. Meaning, a dragon who can't even adapt to his own surroundings or needs to always have his hand held by others is a useless dragon as well as a disgrace to his race. Said Naruto, which made Rias annoyed slightly. "What does that have to do with Issei?" asked Rias, not getting what he wants to explain, which got her an annoyed look from Luminous. "He has the boosted gear which houses a heavenly dragon, that makes the good-for-nothing pervert to some extent a dragon himself. You're coddling him way too much, which is why he is so weak and dependent on you," said Luminous, which Rias understood. But still, Rias tried to find a method that doesn't involve something harsh since Issei was just recently reincarnated and needed time to get accustomed to his surroundings. "Rias, we're not having this conversation right now. Our parents and our dear older brother had given me the green signal to do whatever the hell I deem is good to get your dysfunctional team to a satisfying level. If he can't deal with this like a man, then there is no hope for him," said Naruto as Rias went quiet. She was aware that their parents and older brother had allowed this. "Oi, Hyodo, if you don't get that ass of yours moving, we'll leave you behind," said Naruto as he started moving along with his Peerage members, who were all carrying larger bags with much ease. "Wait," shouted Issei as he started to stand up and move a little bit faster, but got his face comically planted on the ground, but managed to quickly stand up and move. "Also, Argento-san, you should stop helping him every time. This is for his own good, so focus on yourself," said Naruto as Asia meekly nodded her head as she tried to leave Issei, but part of her consciousness was making it hard to leave Issei, who was in need of help. "Wow, fantastic," Asia exclaimed in a happy voice as she admired the house that all of them will be staying in, as it featured a nice mansion with a pond and a lake. "Now listen up, kiddies, put your backpacks in the room that you will be staying in with your soon-to-be roommates and get back here to start your training right away," said Naruto, making Issei sulk even more. "Training right away?" asked Issei in shock as Naruto grabbed Issei by the face, lifting him a few feet off the ground and looked at him with his blue eyes which turned blood red. Do you have a problem with what I'm saying, Hyodo? Asked Naruto in a menacing tone which terrified Issei enough where he peed his pants as she shook his head rapidly, making Naruto toss him aside and gain an innocent look. Great to hear. Now then, let's get inside as time is of the essence, said Naruto with a cheerful voice as he walked along with his peerage inside, leaving Rias to shake her head in disbelief. Kaneko was smiling as she saw Issei's suffering. Issei and Kiba had taken a room for themselves as they opened their own suitcases and started to change into their respective training gear so that they could start their training right away. Rias, Akano, Kaneko and lastly Asia had taken a larger room where they also started to change into their respective training gear so that they can also take part of the training. The Strauss siblings shared a room together as they had 3 beds close to each other, making them stay close to each other. Elfman, being a manly guy, had stayed outside waiting for his sisters to finish changing their clothes so that he could also change as well. Tokakazi shared a room with Ainz as the two started to change immediately without hesitation, not minding showing each other their own body because they already slept with each other. Lastly, we have the king himself Naruto Gremory and his queen Luminous Valentine together in a room. A king and a queen isn't without their knight, which is where Chloe comes in the picture. Leaving the devil with a monster stamina and a monster dick with a nympho vampire and a knight who is no better than the vampire together in one room was definitely a bad move for the simple reason that the two women were trying to get rid of the last piece of article in Naruto's body, which was his boxer. You're kidding, right? Said Issei, a little bit afraid since Lumina's first-time impression had shown that she wouldn't hesitate to murder him outright and wouldn't get in trouble for it because she's Luminous. You will be safe as long as you don't touch her since she doesn't like anyone that isn't Naruto touching her. Naruto will also not murder you if you don't try anything funny on his women. Aside from our queen, our knight, there is also Mirajane and 2 others, but they aren't here right now, said Tokakazi as he pointed at Mirajane, who gave a gentle smile. Holy shit, he has a harem, Issei shouted in surprise before his expression turned to envy. It was already bad enough with Riser, but now Naruto, but what did he expect from another pretty boy? Ufufu, of course he does. As a matter of a fact, Naruto-sama is one of the most thought-out men in the underworld. The only reason why he doesn't have a large harem is due to several reasons, said Akano with a blush. Akano would be lying if she said that she didn't find Naruto attractive enough where she would have probably assaulted him while he's sleeping. Even Kaneko, who rarely ever showed expression on her face, had always stuck close to Naruto the most back when she was brought to Rias. It reached a point where Rias was getting jealous. So he thinks he's better than everyone, grumbled Issei to himself, but was heard by everyone, with some letting out a sigh at typical Issei being jealous of others. I'm not a man-whore, you know. Naruto's voice was heard, making Issei face pale as he saw Naruto smiling, but behind him stood Luminous, who was already emanating a red menacing aura with a glare directed towards Issei, while Chloe was looking at him like he was trash. Not wanting to sleep with every woman out there doesn't mean that I'm better than anyone, it means I have standards, said Naruto simply as he ignored the obvious killing intent directed at Issei from his 2 girls. Anyways, let's start your training. First, we need to get a grasp of your current strength, so we will need certain measurements to determine what we need to train you the most in, said Naruto as Rias Peerage gained a serious and determined look. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.